Chapter 983. Palace Master, are we going to the Imperial Palace directly? Let's find a place to settle down and walk around, Zhongshang said lightly. He was very interested in some of the current changes in Lan City. After passing through the road from the Yun Nation to Lan City, his interest had intensified and could even be said to be urgent. Previously he could only read about it from the dossiers, but now he could finally see it with his own eyes. After entering the city, Zhongshang looked at the electric poles on the roadside from time to time. It was said that these things made Lan City brightly lit. Nowadays, many people in Great Xia had heard of Lan City's reputation as a sleepless city. However, it was hard for the people of Great Xia to imagine that such a name would appear in a place like Dayo, which was like a barren land. Some people even speculated that Dayo had stolen a huge amount of kerosene from the Yun Nation and lit it up in the city overnight. It was a very foolish guess, but outsiders would never be able to imagine what an electric lamp looked like. It was even difficult for them to understand. On the other hand, the Temple of Heaven's dossier said, "Place thunder and lightning in a crystal ball, and the night will be bright." After settling down, Zhongshang led a few people to walk on the streets of Lan City. I haven't seen many people fighting fiercely along the way. It's a little different from the rumors. It is said that Lan City has built 8 arenas. Any disputes will be settled in the arenas. Otherwise there will be heavy penalties, Jiao Pingsui said. Zhongshang nodded slightly. This was a good idea. Not only did this maintain the aggressive nature of the aboriginals, but it also reduced disputes among the people. Only a nation like Dayo, where strength was respected and the imperial court was filled with top-notch experts, could use this method. It was impossible for other nations to do so. What is this place? Why does it smell so bad? It should be Jinghua, Jiao Ping guessed. The well was a place to relieve oneself. It was usually a building that was slightly taller than an ordinary building, and one could go up the stairs from the outside. Below it was a bucket filled with filth. Oh. Zhongshang took a quick look at it. It was different from the common well spiders in Great Xia. It was much bigger and there were no external stairs or doors. People could only enter from the side. Normally, only one person could enter a well, but this one had many people entering, so it looked even messier. After all, with his status, there was no way he would pay attention to this kind of thing. Then Zhongshang went straight to Jingyang Street, which was his destination. Whenever he saw a shop with a sign of the royal family hanging on it, he would go in and take a look. After walking around, he saw quite a few rare items, especially the royal department store. The table clock, toothpaste, wheat, vermicelli, soy sauce, and underwear were things he had never seen before. He especially liked the table clock and sugar, so he specially bought some. Following which, Renbaqian went to the glass shop, the condiment shop, and even the pastry shop and the bookstore to gain some understanding of the new products that had appeared in Dayo. At present, it seemed that they were mainly focused on the livelihood of the people. However, this was also normal. The truly important things would not appear here. However, he did buy a lot of books in the bookstore. He was very interested in these things. As for the pastry shop, it had just been opened for a month. Every day there was a tempting aroma coming from it. There were not many types of pastries, only a few types of pastries and a few types of sugar. However, the taste was excellent and there was even freshly squeezed fruit juice. Although the price was not low, it was sold out every day after it was released. Tong Lan was a regular customer here. She spent more than half of her monthly salary here, which made her rather resentful. Zhongshang wandered in Lan City until it was dark and was finally satisfied. Lan City had indeed changed. Along the way he saw some non-aboriginals walking the same way as the aboriginals. Both sides turned a blind eye to each other, and the situation was much better than what he had heard before. It seemed that the people of Lan City were also changing. He only saw it after the street lights were turned on at night. If the literati of Great Xia were here, they might have left behind 2 poems that would be passed down through the ages. It would have been even better if there were no white skeletons with little red flowers hanging everywhere that teased his nerves from time to time. In particular, when the night wind blew, it was really chilly and ghostly wails and wolf howls. The next day, Zhongshang requested to see the Empress and Renbaqian. The Empress did not give him a good look. In fact, it was already a form of tolerance that she did not make a move on the spot, and Zhongshang would not have any opinion on this. However, Zhongshang's main purpose was to see Renbaqian. In addition, he also wanted to see the child who had caused an uproar. Renbaqian did not care about this. It could be said that Qi Yuqing had an extremely high status in the hearts of these experts. In the future, when she walked out of the land of exile, this child would probably be the top fighting force of the human race. After seeing the little fellow, Zhongshang looked at Rinpochen and asked, "Can I see her condition? The muscles on her body seem a little unnatural." Rinpochen nodded. In fact, he also knew what was going on with Qi Yuqing's muscles. Back then, she absorbed too much essence blood from the Empress's body, and the power was too great for her. As a result, she was born with muscles. As she gradually grew up, the energy stored in her body would gradually be absorbed, and she would return to her normal body size. However, it was hard to say whether she could develop a body of muscles again. Zhongshang's conclusion after seeing her was the same as what Rinpochen had learned before. As for the speed of recovery, it was difficult to calculate. This was because it still depended on her martial arts talent and the speed at which she transformed essence blood. In the past, there were cases of spirit wheel experts giving birth to children. Although the descendants of spirit wheel experts were usually more talented, there had never been a situation like Qi Yuqing's. As a result, no one dared to easily measure it. However, Rinpochen did not care. Even if she grew up to be a body of muscles, with her status, there was no need to worry about not being able to get married. After that, Zhongshang stayed in Lan City for half a month and saw the steam train. He was greatly impressed by this tool. If the human race wanted to get out of the 60,000 mountains, it wouldn't be possible with just a few people. They would need a large number of experts, a strong army, a large number of supplies, and a steady stream of follow-up forces. It would also be difficult for so many people to cross the 60,000 mountains. Back then, the average strength of the last 100,000 people was much stronger than it was now. There were almost no old or weak people among them. However, only half of the 100,000 people were left. Previously, when he heard Rinpochen say that there was a tool to fly in the sky, he also thought about it. However, after seeing the train, he immediately realized that this tool could send the human race across the 60,000 mountains. Of course, enough tracks had to be laid. However, as long as there were enough materials and manpower, this could be achieved. A few days later, the first batch of tractors would be sold, and Zhongshang would be able to see this new steel monster with his own eyes. After 4 months, Rinpochen finally saved up 200 tractors, which was already the full production capacity. However, the experts had made adjustments to the production line, and the craftsmen were more familiar with it. In the future, the production speed should be much faster. Previously, most of the people in Lan City had heard of this kind of metal monster that could walk on its own. When the 5 tractors drove into Lan City, the entire city was in an uproar. Countless people crowded on both sides of the streets just to catch a glimpse of this kind of metal monster. Next, it was the newly opened Royal Geely Tractor 4S shop. Someone explained the parameters and functions of the tractors in front of the shop. Of course, most people couldn't understand and were just there to watch the excitement. However, when the sale started, 200 tractors were sold in a flash, and more than 500 were reserved. Of course, some of these people were from the various departments, and some were arranged by Rinpochen himself. What surprised him was that the Zhang family and a few other merchants from the Yun nation had reserved nearly 100 tractors. It had to be said that these families had a really keen sense of smell. As for the commoners, when these tractors sped through the roads and fields of Dayo and the Yun nation, the commoners would clearly see the difference between this new machine and the previous manpower and animal power. Naturally, they would know how to choose. He was also prepared to publish chicken soup for the soul in the newspapers for a few days. The story of an ordinary person who paid off his loan within a year after buying a tractor and then reached the pinnacle of his life and married a fair, rich, and beautiful woman. Do you really not want great Xia? You have to know that there are tens of millions of people, a vast land, and countless mines. It should be able to achieve your goals faster. On the second day after the tractors entered the city, Zhongshang brought up the old matter again. He now felt that this land was the best in Rinpochen's hands. Rinpochen could change this land. The things that he could do couldn't be done by others. I've said that I'm not interested. Rinpochen waved his hand. Did he want to tire himself to death with the addition of Great Xia? Besides, the changes in this world are gradual and affect each other. The changes in Dayo will eventually bring changes to Great Xia and the Qin nation. I just need to hold the rope and let them dance with me. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second. Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 984. Half a month later, after half a month of driving training, the first batch of 200 tractors finally set off. 60 of them were carrying a large amount of glassware, animal skins, and spices to the Yun nation. Others went to the Protectorate of the Southeast and the Protectorate of the North, and some directly brought the parts for rotary tillage into the fields. Little Shirtu, where have you been these days? Earth doesn't care anymore? What is this? It can actually run on its own? These people all lived in farms outside the city, so they had heard very little about tractors. When they saw a young man driving this strange thing back, they were all amazed. Call me Mischievous Stone, don't call me Little Stone. This is a tractor. You've never heard of it, right? No. It can be used to transport goods and plow fields. It's a new invention of Zhao Prince Consort. Mischievous Stone showed off. This thing can plow the land? What are these round ones for? Many people were amazed. That's a tire. Don't stab it with a knife. I'm telling you, whoever stabs it, I'll fight with you. The man who was originally sitting on the tractor and showing off according to the script suddenly jumped down in exasperation. Everyone chuckled and dispersed. How about it? Do you want to compete and see who can plow faster? What's there to compete about physical labor? 1 tael of silver. If you win, I'll give you a tael of silver. If you win, you'll work for me for a day. An ordinary citizen's monthly income was no more than 1 tael to 1.5 taels of silver. How could they refuse such a good opportunity? Immediately, a few strong men spoke up. How do we compete? The 6 of us will compete together. If the 5 of you can plow faster and better than me, I'll consider it your win. I'll give you a tael of silver. If the 5 of you can't beat me, then come and work for me for a day. Bah, are you looking down on us? Do you want to find a place to practice? The few burly men immediately said angrily. Whether you think highly of me or not, we'll talk about it after we compete. This time, let's compete in plowing the land, not in punching and kicking. Mischievous Stone chuckled. Little Shirtu, just wait to pay up. The few burly men said one after another. All right, tomorrow morning we'll start at dawn. Mischievous Stone laughed and said, Get out of the way, I won't care if you bump into me. He stepped on the accelerator, and the tractor drove away with a tutu-tutu sound. TSK, this thing is really fresh. Speaking of which, Zhao Prince Consort is really amazing. So many things were made by him. Yes. Although he isn't strong, all the new things in Lan City in recent years are related to him. Nonsense. How could His Majesty's judgment be wrong? Otherwise, why would Her Majesty choose him to be her husband even though we have so many experts and talents? He must be amazing. Did you hear? A few years ago, Zhao Prince Consort had a duel with someone and created such a huge pit outside the city. I went to see it when I entered the city. It was more than 100 meters. I also went to take a look. I heard that a single strike created such a huge crater. Everyone was talking about him. After a few years, the people around Lan City had changed their opinion of him. However, everyone still felt that even though Zhao Prince Consort was impressive, it didn't mean that he knew how to farm. They didn't believe that such a thing could surpass 5 strong laborers and the fork-horned cow. The next morning, before dawn, everyone arrived at the field. Even those who weren't participating in the competition were willing to come and watch the show. More than half of the 100 people in the village had arrived. Little Shirtu isn't here yet? Don't tell me that guy is still sleeping? Let's wait. Why don't someone go and wake him up? Just when everyone was getting impatient, they heard a flapping sound from afar. He's here, he's here. Why is this thing farting along the way? These words immediately caused a burst of laughter. However, everyone was somewhat envious of Little Shirtu, who was riding a steel monster with a trail of smoke all the way from afar. This thing looked very cool. However, what everyone couldn't understand was how Little Shirtu got so much money. The weight of this steel monster wasn't light, and the price was definitely not something that ordinary people could afford. It wasn't easy for Little Shirtu to fork out 3 taels of silver. Where did he get the money to buy such a steel monster? Everyone is early. Little Shirtu, it's time for the competition, right? There are 5 of us and only 1 of you? I'll give you a chance to correct yourself lest you say that we are bullying you. Although these people were fierce, they were still simple and kind enough to remind him. Just don't say that I am bullying you when the time comes. Little Shirtu waved his hand confidently. A few days ago he had seen a demonstration of this thing. Okay, don't talk nonsense. It just so happens that the newly refurbished land is ready to be plowed. You guys start from that end. Little Shirtu, start from this end. Okay, let's do that. Little Shirtu smiled and drove the tractor to the other end of the field. When they arrived at the edge of the field, Little Shirtu first pressed down the raised rotary tiller, and the gears were deeply embedded in the soil. He turned his head to look into the distance and saw that the people had already begun to work. Little Shirtu sat back on the tractor and touched it here and there. He couldn't hide the love in his heart. He didn't expect that such a good thing would fall into his hands. It was all thanks to his uncle, Tai Dao. After touching the brand new steel monster, Little Shirtu smiled and stepped on the accelerator. After installing the rotary tiller, the speed of the tractor slowed down a bit. He could feel the resistance from the soil. However, the steel monster under him still moved forward without hesitation. The people who were observing from a distance suddenly let out a soft cry. He turned his head to look at the 5 people. At this time, each of them had almost plowed a quarter of the field. Moreover, they used manpower to plow first and then used horned cows. This way they could save more animal power and could plow an additional 2 mu in a day. The 5 people plowed a total of 40 mu in a day. The strange thing under Little Shitu's feet could plow 40 mu? Time slowly passed, and when the sun was about to reach the sky, everyone's expression changed. The 5 people next to them had already taken a break, but Little Shitu's speed didn't slow down at all. He kept plowing at the same speed without stopping, and he had already caught up with the 5 people. The 5 people plowed 25 mu in the morning, which was already their fastest speed. In the afternoon they could plow at most 15 mu. On the other hand, Little Shirtu plowed 30 mu in the morning, but the steel monster under him still didn't look tired at all. This gave everyone a bad premonition in their hearts. Could it be that this thing was comparable to 5 people and 5 horned cows? In the afternoon, the speed of the 5 people next to them had slowed down, but Little Shirtu was still plowing at the same speed. The thing behind him, which had been rotating all the time, was still constantly turning the soil. It wasn't until the evening that Little Shirtu wiped his sweat and jumped down from the tractor. He raised his eyebrows and said, "How is it? Are you convinced now?" Everyone's eyes weren't on him, but on the steel monster under Little Shirtu. This thing plowed 60 mu of land for a whole day, and it didn't stop at all. It was simply terrifying. Damn it. A man who was sweating profusely cursed. This thing is really strong. Yes, the 5 of them had used up all their strength and plowed 45 mu of land. However, this thing's stability was simply despairingly stable. Hee hee. Little Shirtu laughed rather contentedly. Are you willing to admit defeat? Bah, am I someone who doesn't keep to my words? Do you believe that I won't let you have a taste of my fist? Night came, but the excitement in the farm didn't subside. A group of people surrounded the tractor and discussed it. At the same time, they asked Little Shirtu about the situation of this thing and its price. When they heard that it cost 200 taels, everyone was a bit silent. This thing was good, but unfortunately they couldn't afford it. Don't think it's too expensive. Let me tell you, this thing is worth 10 laborers. 10 laborers can earn 100 taels a year, and you can earn it back in 2 years. How can we have so much money? Speaking of which, where did you get the money from? Someone asked. Don't worry about me. As for the money, this thing can be paid in installments. Zhao Prince Consort said that in order to improve the situation of us commoners, Her Majesty will use her own pocket to pay for it first. After that, we will pay a little more every year, and it will take up to 5 years at most. Do the math. After 5 years we will pay 40 taels of silver a year. This thing can be used by 10 laborers to earn 100 taels a year, and the remaining 60 taels will belong to us. Moreover, after I pay off His Majesty's debt in 5 years, this thing will be mine. After Little Shirtu finished speaking, the people around him began to count with their fingers and toes. After a long time, they still couldn't figure out if this was the case. What he said seems to make sense. Let me think about it, someone said hesitantly. For the commoners, 200 taels of silver was an astronomical figure. Even if this figure was placed in front of them, it would be difficult for them to decide what to do. Most of them would just wait and see. In fact, this was Rinpoche's objective. After all, the current production of tractors was completely insufficient. What he was doing now was to make tractors deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. 2 to 3 years later, when the lives of the first batch of people using tractors improved, the tractor market would be fully launched. Little Shirtu also said in a timely manner, "It's just like how you can buy it now if you want to. Let me tell you, 200 taels of silver. Don't you see how heavy this thing is? It's all made of iron, and the iron alone weighs more than 500 kilograms. I heard that Zhao Prince Consort is selling it at a loss, and Her Majesty is paying for it to make our lives better. Otherwise, believe it or not, this thing can't even be bought with 1,000 taels of silver. This thing already weighs more than 500 kilograms of iron. Can 200 taels of silver buy 500 kilograms of iron? However, I'm just saying this to you. There aren't many of these things now. The 6 departments have reserved them for a few months, let alone you guys. As for me, hee hee. Don't forget that I have an uncle who works under Zhao Prince Consort. After hearing little Shidu's words, everyone began to feel grateful for the Empress's kindness. The Empress's reputation was already high, but she was so considerate of them, which made them deeply moved. Zhao Prince Consort's prestige had also greatly increased in their hearts. At the same time they began to warm up to the tractors. Sometimes they would hesitate when something was placed in front of them. However, when they couldn't buy it even if they wanted to, the situation would be reversed. Ren Baqin looked at the information in his hand and was quite satisfied. These people had done a good job. He estimated that the tractors that went to the Yun nation would return in a few days. At this time, Zhongshang was sitting in the carriage and looking at the letter in his hand with a smile on his face. He and the others had only traveled half the distance, and the tractors that set off at the same time with so many goods had actually arrived at Pingdu a few hours ago. Amazing. It's really amazing. Zhongshang exclaimed. According to Zhao Prince Consort, this kind of thing had actually been eliminated on the other side of the sea. However, it was already enough to shock everyone here. They didn't know what the better things were like. No, he had seen better things such as quantum transmission. Unfortunately, he couldn't understand it. At this time, the Yun nation was also shocked by those iron monsters. In particular, the merchants who had been paying attention couldn't sit still. There was an aboriginal sitting on the back of each of the mounts, and there was another aboriginal sitting on the back of the carriage that they were pulling. Get out of the way, get out of the way. The people lining up to enter the city made way for him. Yan Nan. Hearing the shouts from the carriage, the young man took another look at the strange armored mounts before entering the carriage. Father, it's a group of ancient race tribesmen. However, their mounts are really weird. How so? The old man was non-committal. It was recorded in the ancient books that there were all kinds of ferocious beasts in the 60,000 mountains. It doesn't seem to be alive. The young man thought about it and confirmed, that's right, it's not alive. The old man was taken aback. He pulled open the curtain at the side and turned his head to look behind him. All he saw was a strange thing emitting smoke moving toward him. The old man stared at the strange thing until it passed by him. He was finally sure that it was just as Yan Nan had said, it wasn't alive. Below it were carriage-like wheels. There was no traction but it could move on its own. Furthermore, the carriage that it was pulling was at least a few times larger than the ox cart. This thing was really strong. Then came the second one, the third one, and a total of 30 of them passed by him and entered Wang capital without stopping. No one was surprised that no one dared to stop the aboriginals from entering the city. Everyone's attention wasn't on them. Instead, they were on those weird things. After the aboriginals left, the people who were hiding at the side returned to the path. Smelling the weird odor, they were all surprised. That's right. That's right. The 30 tractors entering the city caused quite a commotion in Wang capital. Many people scrambled to avoid these monsters, and gathered together to discuss them after they left. As for the people on the tractors, they were very proud of themselves. They had learned 2 words from Zhao Prince Consort. One was, galloping like lightning, and the other was, flashy. Although these tractors weren't galloping like lightning, they were flashy enough for them to show off. Unfortunately, they were in front of the people of the Yun nation and not in Lan City. However, they would return very soon. These 30 tractors created a huge splash in Wang capital. 10 days later, the caravan brought back some news that really set off a storm in Wang capital. It would only take 3 days to travel from Lan City to Pingdu and 2 days to travel from Pingdu to Wangjing, which could carry more than 5 ox carts of goods. Furthermore, only 1 or 2 people would be needed. Before this, it would take at least 15 days to transport the goods. Anyone with a bit of knowledge would know what this meant. Furthermore, it would only take 5 days to transport the Aboriginal army from Lan City to Wang capital. This speed made their hair stand on end. Looking at the stack of membership forms in his hands, Rinpoche wanted to give Blood Sea Demon a thumbs up. His actions and work efficiency were enough for Rinpoche to award him a Model Worker Medal. Of course, Rinpoche wasn't sure how many of these people really wanted to join and how many only wanted to join because he held a knife to their necks. In any case, according to the notes from the rearguard commandery, half of them fought with Blood Sea Demon. And now, Blood Sea Old Devil was heading towards Coiling Dragon Valley. That was his old enemy. Blood Sea Old Devil had been entangled with them for dozens of years. Every time, it would be one against the other or a group of them against him. Now he finally had a helper. Zhao Zhao and Murong Qing went with Blood Sea Demon. Rinpoche was more interested in Dong Cheng. It had been a few years since he came to this world, but this was the first time he saw a heaven wheel practitioner. The heaven wheel was the only way to advance from the earth wheel level to the spirit wheel level. It was also known as the path to heaven. Rushing through the gates of heaven would allow one to be reborn. If one couldn't, one would remain an earth wheel expert for the rest of their life. Generally, a practitioner would only stay at the heaven wheel level for a short period of time, ranging from a month to a year or two at most. They would either soar to the sky or fall to the ground. Therefore, practitioners at this stage would focus on their cultivation, which was extremely rare. The reason why Blood Sea Old Ghost reported this person was because of his potential. Heaven wheel at the age of 23. Although he was far from being comparable to someone like Li Yuanzhu, he still had great potential. If everything went well, he would be able to reach the spirit wheel level within a year or two. Chapter 986. The Coiling Dragon Valley had a very strange topography. In the middle of the valley there was a towering mountain, and around the mountain was a twisted river. Looking down from the mountain, it looked like a coiled dragon. This mountain was called the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain, and there was a Tianmen sect on the mountain. In the past it was considered an extremely famous sect in Great Xia, and it had never declined for hundreds of years. However, in recent decades, its reputation had plummeted, and it was all because of one person. He was like an unkillable cockroach. He advanced from the earth wheel to the spirit wheel, condensed a heaven-grade weapon, and finally became a top expert in the world. Because of his persistent pestering, the Heavenly Gates sect had suffered great losses over the years, and its reputation had plummeted. More than once, the people in the sect blamed the person who provoked this great enemy, but they didn't dare to show it. That person was the current Tianmen sect leader. No one knew if the sect leader regretted his youthful recklessness. However, everyone was clear about one thing. At this point, the Tianmen sect could no longer retreat. If they took a step back now, the last bit of face of the Heaven Gate would be gone. In the future, when others talked about the Heavenly Gate sect, they would say that it had been pulled down from the top sect by one person and ended up in a state of disgrace. The Heavenly Gates sect would no longer need to be seen by others, and even their ancestors would have to jump out of their graves. On this day, that bastard is here again. We've reached the entrance of the valley. Who? Old Ghost? Quickly informed the sect leader. As soon as the Blood River Demon arrived at the entrance of the valley, the Tianmen sect, which used to be a top sect, felt as if it was facing a formidable enemy. It could be seen how much pressure the Blood River Demon had put on the Tianmen sect. In fact, it was not only the Heavenly Gate sect. No matter who provoked such an unkillable opponent who became stronger the more they fought, everyone would feel numb. Even though Shui didn't do anything bad in Rinpoche's eyes, everyone in the Tianmen sect felt that he was an evil spirit through and through. Many people had heard of his notoriety ever since they entered the sect. Not long after, Shui and Old Ghost swaggered to the front of the Heaven Gate sect's mountain gate. A blood-red blade appeared in their hands. Upon closer inspection, the blade looked like flowing blood. It was so red that it made people panic and it gave off a bloody smell. Old Ghost Shui raised the blood saber in his hand and was about to destroy the mountain gate. A loud shout suddenly came from the sky. Impudent! A giant sword fell from the sky. Yee! Shui cackled as he retreated several tens of feet in a flash. The dust in front of him dissipated to reveal a middle-aged man who appeared to be in his 50s. A 3-meter-tall giant sword was stabbed into the ground in front of him. In fact, both of them were much older than they looked. Blood River Old Ghost had been at odds with the Tianmen sect for 70 years. It was just that their spirit wheel level made time pass exceptionally slowly for them. Shui, you really won't give up. Today I will let you fall here so that you do not harm others. The middle-aged man angrily rebuked. Shui let out a weird laugh. Slaughter? Who did I hurt? My Heaven's Gate sect's Elder Lin, Elder Fu, the Outer sect's Steward Lu, and dozens of true disciples all died at your hands. This blood feud will be repaid today. The middle-aged man scolded. Bah, serves you right. Blood River rolled his eyes and spat out a mouthful of phlegm. Blood River, you're courting death. Another 4 people descended from the sky, surrounding Blood River from all directions. These 4 people were of different genders and ages. There were 3 men and 1 woman, but they were all at the spirit wheel level. However, my main purpose today isn't to fight. Blood River Old Ghost changed his tone. The middle-aged man was slightly stunned. Blood River's main purpose today wasn't to fight? Why was that? After fighting for so many years, he didn't believe that Blood River Old Ghost would stop. If Blood River Old Ghost was willing to stop, he would have done so long ago. A demon like you must be punished, but I want to know what you want to do. The Tianmen sect chief put his hands behind his back. TSK, I just want to ask if you want to join us. If you are willing to join us, I might let you off. Everyone sneered. You want to let us off? Even if you are one of the few experts in the world, your words are too arrogant. You. Blood River hesitated for a moment and said in a muffled voice, Go Home Public Welfare Organization. In the end, he was too embarrassed to say the full name. Everyone was confused. What was he talking about? Those who are in cahoots with a demon like you are definitely evil. The Tianmen sect is a famous sect. How can we have anything to do with you scoundrels? The middle-aged man reprimanded with a sullen face, but he was vigilant. What organization did Blood River actually join? What kind of people were in this organization? From what he said, he actually wanted to pull him in. Presumably, the other people in the organization weren't mediocre. Then he made up his mind to keep Blood River here today no matter what. Previously, Blood River was already so difficult to deal with. If other people joined in, the danger would be greatly increased. He didn't know if Blood River brought any helpers today. Blood River revealed a strange smile and said, You better think carefully. This was proposed by Zhao Prince Consort of Dayo. You actually surrendered to the barbarians. Blood River, you want our Tianmen sect to surrender to the barbarians? You are really thinking the wrong way. This is simply wishful thinking, the Tianmen sect chief scolded angrily. Blood River, you deserve to die 1,000 times over. A few people beside him also spoke up. However, everyone was happy. Previously, Blood River and the Tianmen sect were two parties, and it wasn't appropriate for the other sects to intervene. Now that Blood River had surrendered to the foreign races, the other sects wouldn't let him off if this news got out. So, you guys aren't willing to join us? Blood River smiled sinisterly. Nonsense, why would we associate ourselves with you scoundrels and barbarians? If you say so, then this old man is relieved. Blood River suddenly laughed loudly. How could he hope that his enemies of so many years would join his organization? Previously, he didn't make it clear and deliberately pointed out the identity of Zhao Prince Consort of Dayo. He didn't mention Li Yuanzhu, Li Fu and the others at all. He was just waiting for them to say this. After saying this, they could die. Men set up the formation. The Tianmen sect chief commanded. Another 36 people descended from the mountain, all of whom were at the earth wheel level. They formed two circles with the previous 4 people and surrounded Blood River. Today we will get rid of this evil for the people. Since you guys refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, it's your turn to attack with me, my 2 brothers? Blood River laughed. Indeed, you brought helpers. The Tianmen sect chief made up his mind. It was better to appear now than to be caught off guard later. However, when the 2 of them walked out from afar and appeared in front of everyone, their expressions changed. Who are you? Zhao. Murongqing. The faces of everyone from the Tianmen sect changed drastically. The appearance of the tractor had given Dayo and the Yun nation a lot more vitality. Like blood carrying oxygen to all parts of the body, the tractors that traveled to and fro delivered supplies to other places in a very short period of time. In particular, tractors could be seen entering and exiting several city gates almost every day, transporting large amounts of supplies in and out of Lan City. Lan City's glass products, spices and animal hides were all popular in the Yun nation and brought in a lot of profits. The cost of a cart of glass products was only a few hundred taels of silver, but it could be sold for tens of thousands of taels of silver in the Yun nation. This was even after lowering the selling price. After all, the Yun nation was now considered a part of Dayo. Even if they were shaving wool, they couldn't let the other party rebound. Otherwise, how were they going to sell the rest of the products? The profit of spices was no less than that of glass products. Chapter 987. In December of the 76th year of the Dayo calendar, the Royal Geely Tractor 4S shop opened in Lan City, and the first batch of 200 tractors officially appeared in front of everyone in the world. In February of the 77th year of the Dayo calendar, the second batch of 500 tractors was delivered. There were at least 300 tractors going back and forth between Lan City and the Yun nation, transporting large amounts of iron, food, cloth, salt and other materials. The monthly transportation volume could reach 7 million kilograms. In the past, this transportation volume required more than 10,000 people and 7,000 fork-horned cows. During this period, countless grains and fodder were consumed. Now it only required a maximum of 600 people. This saved more than 95% of manpower and animal power, as well as countless grains and fodder. What was consumed was biodiesel, which was considered cheap in comparison. For the first batch of merchants who received the tractors, the caravan originally required at least 30 to 40 vehicles and more than 100 people. Less than 20 of the vehicles were loaded with goods, while the rest were loaded with grains and fodder consumed on the road. It would take more than 100 people a month to transport 20,000 kilograms of goods back and forth. The personnel expenses alone would cost more than 200 taels of silver, and the grains and fodder consumed on the road were worth nearly 100 taels of silver. Now, only one tractor and 2 people were needed to achieve the same transportation volume. The personnel expenses were less than 10 taels of silver, and the so-called biodiesel consumed was about 120 liters, which was worth 20 taels of silver, for a round trip of more than 3,000 kilometers. In other words, after investing 1,000 taels of silver, the monthly expenses would be less than 90 taels of silver, which was 70% lower than the previous transportation cost of a caravan. The most important thing was that it saved a lot of manpower and material resources. It was more flexible and fast, and it could transport the required goods to the destination in a short period of time. The value of this was more important than the savings in silver. Previously, due to the limited transportation volume, they could only transport about 20,000 kilograms of goods at a time. It was difficult for the caravan to turn around and the risk was great. In particular, Dayo had a rainy season that lasted for more than 5 months. If the caravan was trapped somewhere, the losses would be even greater. Now they were no longer subject to this restriction and could easily transport goods that were 10 times or even dozens of times their original volume. As a result, the caravan's goods weren't just those that were highly profitable, but there were also many more types of goods. After all, the market for those high-profit goods was limited. After the market supply and demand reached a balance, they set their sights on other goods. In just a few months, the prices of many goods in both places had dropped. In the Yun nation, the prices of meat, grains, herbs, needles, and thread had dropped. A large number of four-corn cows, sweet potatoes, and other high-yielding crops had caused the prices of beef and grains to drop by 10%. Sweet potatoes and potatoes, which were both vegetables and grains, had become an important part of the meals of ordinary people in the Yun nation in a short period of time. In fact, the merchants of the Yun nation didn't care much about the profits from selling potatoes and sweet potatoes. A trip of 2,500 caddies would result in a profit of 2 copper coins per caddy, which was only 10,000 copper coins, which was close to 9 taels of silver. The profit of 10 tractors traveling from Dayo to the Yun nation was no more than 90 taels. However, after Rinpoche expressed his stance in private, those families immediately knew what to do. The prices of salt, cloth, tea leaves, wine, and ironware in Lan City dropped again. Although the iron mines were controlled by the Dayo imperial court, there were a lot of ironware in the Yun nation. Those merchants naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Even though pots and knives were expensive in the Yun nation, they couldn't be compared to those in Lan City. Stop manufacturing rotary plowing pendants and switch to the production of harvesting pendants, Rinpoche said to his subordinate. That thing is quite useful, but it consumes too much fuel, the man replied honestly. Well, got it. Rinpoche nodded. That's right, it consumed too much fuel. It was fine if tractors were used for transportation, but the biggest problem arose when they were used in agriculture. Although tractors could indeed save manpower and could rotate 60 mu of land in a day, the problem of fuel consumption became the biggest problem that restricted the use of tractors. 1 mu of land cost 3 liters of oil and half a tael of silver. 100 mu of land would cost 50 taels of silver. Which commoner could afford it? It had to be known that a laborer could only do this for 20 days at most. Could a laborer earn 50 taels of silver a year? He might not even earn 50 taels of silver a year. Moreover, there was still sowing, weeding, irrigation, and harvesting. As a result, after the initial enthusiasm compared to transportation, which was now favored by everyone, the most important aspect of tractors was agriculture. Of course, this didn't mean that tractors had no value, but that they were limited by the number of mu of land in Dayo and the price of oil. The strength of the four-corn cow and the aboriginals was also a factor. On Earth, a cow and a strong laborer could only plow about 2 mu of land in a day with iron plows. Here they could plow 6 mu of land in a day with wooden plows. In addition, due to the limited number of mu of land, it was difficult for tractors to be used. Fortunately, in terms of language, the little fellow was finally somewhat similar to an ordinary person. Following Rinpoche's actions, The little fellow pointed at herself with a smile and said, "Father. I'm your father." Ren Baqin pointed at himself again and tried to correct her mistake. He was the real father. However, the little guy still pointed at himself in confusion. That. Ren Baqin thought about it and decided to give up on correcting her futile actions. Looking at the little guy who was almost as tall as his waist, he was indeed growing too fast. When the little fellow was born, she was twice the size of an ordinary baby and should be 60 to 70 centimeters long. Now she was 1 meter tall and had grown 30 centimeters in half a year. He wondered how big she would be when she was 2 or 3 years old. He hoped that she would be more like an ordinary person. Ren Baqin sincerely hoped that she would be more like an ordinary person. Although it was indeed gratifying to have an outstanding descendant, Ren Baqin still hoped that she could have a childhood that was closer to that of an ordinary person and not go hunting tigers at the age of 1 and catch dragons at the age of 2. At night, Ren Baqin seriously discussed very important matters with the Empress. "Your Majesty, what do you think Hua will call you after she learns to speak?" The Empress replied without hesitation, "Mother? What about me? Father? Your Majesty, don't you feel awkward?" Ren Baqin looked helpless. This was the problem. Children from ordinary families could just call each other father and mother. But him and the Empress, how should the child be called? Mother. Why did it sound so awkward? And why did it sound even more awkward to call her father? The Empress didn't care and said, "It's good that I don't feel awkward and there's nothing wrong with it." In fact, there didn't seem to be anything wrong. Ren Baqin sighed and said, "How about I call you mother and call me father?" The Empress thought about it and said, "It sounds distant. Do you care about this a lot?" "I can't say that I care a lot." Ren Baqin felt that he didn't have much of a choice in this matter. Besides, the Empress didn't despise him when she chose him, right? However, he still felt somewhat awkward. Seeing that the Empress was still staring at him, Ren Baqin suddenly had a flash of inspiration and knew what the problem was. Other princesses and princes call the Empress mother, but the problem is that I haven't been conferred the title of Empress. I'm Zhao Prince Consort. There's nothing wrong with calling me father. The Empress chuckled and said, "It seems that I have to confer you an Empress." "No need, I'm fine now." Ren Baqin waved his hands. Zhao Prince Consort was more used to it. The two of them laughed and chatted for a while before the little girl ran in from outside with her hands raised, followed by Zhu Hua, who had a head full of grass. "Slow down, princess." Qing Yuan and Hong Luan wanted to help her but didn't dare to. "Don't worry about her," Ren Baqin said. The little girl ran straight to Ren Baqin and the Empress, pointed at herself and said, "Father. Look, your daughter can talk." Ren Baqin smiled and pointed at the little girl. "Hua." The little girl stubbornly pointed at herself and said, "Father." Ren Baqin saw that the little girl was now firmly convinced that she should call him father. The Empress burst out laughing when she saw the two of them. 3 months after the delivery of the scheduled tractors, the second batch of 1,000 taels of tractors finally began to be sold. This time it was much livelier than the previous time. In the past half a month, many merchants from the Yun nation had applied for clearance and arrived at Lan City. At the same time they brought a large number of goods with them. In a short period of time, Lan City was very lively. The most lively place was the alley of the 4 courtyards. It was almost overcrowded. Although the brothels in Lan City had a strange custom, they didn't have the core of a normal brothel. In other words, they only sold their skills and not their bodies. This made many merchants from the Yun nation feel strange and even dissatisfied. However, this was Lan City, and they didn't dare to be presumptuous. Those who dared to be presumptuous were still in prison. Those merchants could only grit their teeth and accept it. However, in other places, they didn't have the opportunity to let the extremely talented earth-wheel disciples of the sects accompany them in a drunken stupor. They could even take advantage of them. This was also the reason why the alley of the 4 courtyards was always full. As for why the 4 courtyards weren't allowed to sell their bodies, the 4 courtyards also felt that they were quite innocent. Was it their fault that Zhao Prince Consort, Minister Tong and Minister Zhua visited a brothel? Your Majesty, you should look for Zhao Prince Consort and Minister Tong. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second. Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 989. Now that I have nothing to do, I'm here to ask if you prefer a bald head or a bald head. Or do you have any other nice-sounding choices? Actually, I quite like a bald head and have even shaved it before. It's a pity that the shape of my head doesn't suit me. I'm deeply regretful. The gigolo of the female empress's family, what kind of fan name do you like? Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 990. Damn it, that Lung Rong is obviously a whore, but she still dared to give me a hard time. A young man cursed indignantly as he walked under the street lamp. She is the most talented disciple of this generation in the Tangled Silk Palace. Coupled with her good looks, the number of practitioners pursuing her can line up from the Tangled Silk Palace to the foot of the mountain. If not for I reckon she would be the next palace master of the Tangled Silk Palace. Another young man winked and laughed. It's hard for us to even see her, let alone get intimate with her. So what? Isn't she still a whore now? That young man wasn't polite at all. Forget it, everyone in the brothel in Wangjing decides who they want to see. Besides, this is Lan City. Even if you don't like it, you don't have to take it to heart. After hearing this, that young man finally calmed down a little. That's right, this was Lan City and not some other place. Even in Wangjing he couldn't do whatever he wanted, let alone here. Just as he suppressed the anger in his heart, he felt his body being dragged to the side by his companion. Make way. Make way. Just as the two of them reached the roadside, two huge figures swept past them. The wind brought by them blew directly on their faces. Although there were no sounds of hooves, every time the two huge figures landed on the ground, there would be a slight tremor. A red saber-toothed tiger and a leopard-like mount with horns on its head, as well as two people on their backs, disappeared into the darkness with loud laughter. If it weren't for his companion who pulled him, he would have been hit by these two big fellows and ended up with broken bones and tendons. However, the rider on their backs didn't even look at the two of them. This made him feel a little depressed. Although he was depressed, he really couldn't afford to offend these two people. After coming to Lan City for a few days, he had asked around. Although he hadn't seen these two people before, he had heard about these two mounts. The red saber-toothed tiger belonged to the public security official, by Shuring's residence, and it was said to have the strength of an advanced earth wheel expert. As for the horned mount, it belonged to the examination official's residence and also had the strength of an intermediate earth wheel expert. Not to mention the two people on its back, he couldn't even afford to offend these two mounts. One had to know that his family only had two guests who were at least at the earth wheel level, and one of them was only at the initial stage of the earth wheel level. Even he had to greet him respectfully when he met him. This kind of mount with the strength of an earth wheel expert wouldn't betray him easily. If he could obtain one, he would be the strongest person in the family. Even the family head wouldn't treat him lightly. Unfortunately, he could only dream about it. Have you heard? These things are called street lamps. They contain thunder and lightning inside, which is why they can emit such light. His companion whispered. The young man was not in a good mood at the moment, so he responded with a grunt. Of course he had heard of it, but he didn't believe it. It's hard to say if it's true or not, but it's really beautiful. His companion sighed again. The young man had to admit that even though Lan City wasn't as prosperous as Wang Capital, the size of the city was much smaller. However, Lan City was indeed beautiful at night. The sleepless city truly lived up to its reputation. It was enough to make people sigh in admiration. Hey Qingji, how many tractors do you think we can sell tomorrow? Another person suddenly asked. I don't know. In any case, we have to find a way to buy a few. The young man finally perked up. This was the purpose of his visit. There doesn't seem to be a lot of these things. Previously, those people waited for 3 months and only got 500. This time it's the same as last time. But this time there are a lot of people. Based on what they knew, at least dozens of families and caravans had come. There were probably more that they didn't know. Everyone's target was the tractors. Otherwise, who would come to this barren land to suffer? Even when walking, they had to stick close to the side. As long as we pay enough money, there will definitely be a way, Qingji said. Before coming here, the family had already considered this situation. Anything that could be solved with money wasn't a big deal. This thing was shockingly cheap. As long as one wasn't a fool, they naturally wouldn't think that it was because the aboriginals were stupid. In fact, the old fellows in the family had more or less analyzed the reason. This time, the bottom line given by the family was 5,000 taels of silver per tractor. This was also a more reasonable price for the aboriginals. After all, the materials used were there, and the cost could be estimated as well. Others were selling it for 200 taels, but they were willing to pay 5,000 taels. It wasn't because of their conscience. Conscience was a joke. It wasn't just for the caravans either. More importantly, it was to build a relationship with Zhao Prince Consort. Previously, Those clans had shipped a lot of food because they followed Zhao Prince Consort's wishes. This left him with a good impression and things became much smoother. Although they were a step late, as long as they were willing to pay the price, it wasn't impossible for them to catch up. To be able to build such a big family business, none of them were fools. Naturally, they knew the principle that money could only be earned if one could spend it. After all, the world was now in the hands of those barbarians. During Qi Zixiao's wedding, those people actually targeted the chancellors. It wasn't until this sudden order to withdraw that everyone realized who was the most important person. The next day, Qing Ji brought his attendants to the Imperial Geely Tractor 4S shop on Jinyang Street with confidence. Everyone could understand what Geely and tractors meant, but until now no one knew what 4S meant. There was already a group of people waiting outside the Tractor 4S shop. Everyone was standing there obediently. At the side, there was a row of tall winged cavalry warriors who exuded a bloody aura, reminding the latecomers what to do. It was said that Zhao Prince Consort liked order. I also like order, Qing Ji thought to himself. There were already many people in front of him, but he wasn't too late. He obediently entered the queue. Even though he could let his attendants go, he felt that it was safer this way and that there wouldn't be any accidents. After he entered the queue, there were still people joining him. The queue was getting bigger and bigger. Not long after, a few Aboriginal ladies dressed in brightly colored clothes came to the front of the queue and said to the first person in line, "This is my seat." The first person in line was a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s. He understood the other party's intention, smiled politely and took 2 steps back. "There isn't enough space," that lady said with a cold face. This time the middle-aged man's face turned ugly. The people behind him were also a little unhappy. Even though it wasn't a big deal to give a seat to an Aboriginal, the other party was being too overbearing. "Line up." At this moment, a sudden voice startled everyone. They turned around and saw a lady dressed in winged cavalry attire. She had a scorpion tattoo on her face, and her hair was in countless braids. Even though her figure wasn't considered strong, one could still see her explosive power under her animal skin clothes. "Are you talking about me?" That lady looked surprised. "Hong Xian, right? Yes, I saw you in the city before. Your grandfather is amazing, but this doesn't mean that you can break the rules set by him. Under Her Majesty's orders, we are here to maintain order. No matter who it is, we will follow Her Majesty's rules." After that lady finished speaking, everyone in the queue cheered. They didn't expect that the Aboriginals and the people of the Yun Nation would be treated equally. Today was the first time they felt carefree from the bottom of their hearts since they came to Lan City. Hong Xian stared at that winged cavalry warrior with eyes full of killing intent. Hong Xian was now at the peak of Kismet Heaven and was one step away from entering the Cardinal Heaven realm and becoming a top expert in Dayo. That winged cavalry warrior was only at the intermediate level of Kismet Heaven. However, he wasn't afraid of Hong Xian's identity and killing intent. He revealed a slightly cruel smile and said, "Get ready." Whoosh. The winged cavalry warriors at the side immediately drew their swords. A chill permeated the entire street. Chapter 991. Well, I got it. Ren Baqian nodded his head slightly as he listened to the guard's report on the incident on Jinyang Street. There wasn't the slightest bit of surprise on Ren Baqian's face, because he was the one who arranged the red thread. Previously, the Empress's order in the Yun Nation had strained the relationship between the two parties, and he had been looking for an opportunity to make some changes. The Yun Nation was very important to Dayo. Whether it was geographical location, population, or mineral resources. He didn't want any more trouble to befall the Yun Nation. The more stable that place was, the better it would be until the Yun Nation became a part of Dayo. It just so happened that that old fool Hongwu had sent a letter some time ago. The meaning of the letter was clear. The Protectorate of the North had worked hard to defend the border and had made great contributions. The Protectorate of the North needed tractors. Strategically, from tactics, from the lives of the soldiers, the importance of tractors to the Protectorate of the North. But there was only one meaning in the end. The Protectorate of the North had no money. "I want a tractor, but I have no money. As for the rest, Your Majesty can arrange it as you see fit." This letter wasn't sent through the Ministry of War. Instead, it was sent directly to the Empress. That old man was simply acting like a hooligan. The Empress knew that Ren Baqian was acting like a hooligan. However, after pondering for a while, she decided to allocate a batch of soldiers to him. To be honest, these tractors weren't that important to Ren Baqian. He was selling them at a loss. 50 tractors were only worth 10,000 taels of silver. It didn't matter to him whether the Protectorate of the Northeast could afford it or not. But at that time he had an idea. They were putting on a show to ease the relationship between the imperial court and the people of the Yun nation. One shouldn't underestimate this show. After all, the people from the Yun nation were people from various families or chambers of commerce. Although they weren't as powerful as the martial artists in the underworld, they had a lot of influence among the people of the Yun nation. If he could change their views, he could influence many people in the Yun nation through them. This included the scholars of the Yun nation who loved to criticize in private. Hong Xian's identity was very suitable. Firstly, she was Hong Wu's granddaughter and could be said to have a prominent status in Dayo. If she were to act in this scene, her influence and persuasiveness would be greater. Given her status, this wasn't just a warning to the people of the Yun nation, but it was also a warning to the Aboriginals. Secondly, she didn't have any official duties and was waiting to break through to the Cardinal Heaven level. Cardinal Heaven and Kismet Heaven were like heaven and earth. Their starting points were completely different. Although there weren't many people who dared to assassinate Rinpoche nowadays, it was still a precaution. Most of the people in the crowd were seeing Zhao Prince Consort for the first time, and they were secretly sizing him up. Rinpoche didn't care about their gazes and walked straight to the front. Someone set up a chair for him and he turned to sit on it, facing the crowd. Everyone, there are a total of 500 tractors this time, but there are some changes to the sales method. Rinpoche said faintly. Then, facing everyone's gaze, he continued, this time it will be an auction. The units will be batches of 5, 10, 15, 20, and the highest batch will be 30. After all, you didn't come from afar just to buy a tractor and go for a ride, right? You are right, Your Highness. The crowd didn't know what he meant, but they still answered. Rinpoche was very satisfied. These people from the Yun nation were good at this point, and there wouldn't be an awkward silence. If it were the Aboriginals, it would be hard to say as there wouldn't even be a supporting character. Rinpoche continued, each tractor will be sold at 200 taels of silver, and the highest bidder will win. There were actually 800 tractors this time. 300 of them were reserved for the Aboriginals, and these 500 were all prepared for the people from the Yun nation. These people were all rich and he wasn't prepared to sell them at a loss. It wasn't good to change his mind, so he simply held an auction. As for how much they were willing to pay, that was their business. If they could really bid for each tractor at 200 taels of silver, what would be the point of giving them to them? Of course this was impossible. Following Rinpoche's words, everyone immediately understood. After all, the Yun nation also had auctions. Zhao Prince Consort, are you going to auction here? Everyone immediately understood what was going on. Don't worry everyone. I'm not here today to inform you of these things. Rinpoche smiled. Please inform us, Your Highness. As far as I know, the Yun nation has tickets, right? Rinpoche asked faintly. Everyone looked at each other and wondered why Rinpoche brought this up. Indeed there are. Tickets were the banks on earth. After all, it was really troublesome for these merchants to carry a large amount of gold and silver for transactions. One had to know that large transactions could easily cost 10,000, 100,000, or even hundreds of thousands of taels of silver, which was really inconvenient to transport. The banks on earth had been developed since the Ming dynasty, but the ticket banks in this world were still in their infancy. Many of them were operated by gold banks, and the capital was only a few 100,000 taels of silver. The main business was to deposit money and settle transactions in other places, but there was no interest in depositing money. They would always take the knife path. Therefore, even though Rinpoche had set up such a ticketing shop, they couldn't help but feel uneasy. Everyone, you can't possibly suspect that the royal family covets you for something, right? We wouldn't dare. If you don't dare, then it means that you have doubts. Rinpoche teased. How could that be? We can still trust the royal family's reputation. That would be great. No matter what you think, the reputation of the royal family is much stronger than those small banks. Moreover, do I covet your money? It's just that it's more convenient for large transactions to circulate. What I see is the whole country. I hope that the emergence of the bank can bring changes to the business model in the future. Rinpoche laughed. After trying out the convenience of the bank, Rinpoche believed that they wouldn't reject it. Even if someone really felt that it was convenient to transport a large amount of gold and silver to trade, Rinpoche would make them feel that it was inconvenient. How could there be no bandits in this day and age? The introduction of a bank, which was actually a money house, was just the first step. Next, the salaries of the various ministries and officials would be distributed through the bank. Next, the salaries of the craftsmen and workers would be distributed. According to the original agreement, it was time to distribute some salaries to the prisoners of war so that they could get used to this kind of work. It was much easier to carry out a task from top to bottom than for others to do it. Using paper money as the standard was naturally a matter of both advantages and disadvantages. There was no need to talk about the advantages. Nowadays, a large amount of copper was used as currency in the market, which made Rinpoche's heart ache. As for the disadvantages, one would know just by looking at the countries with serious inflation. However, Rinpoche already had plans to introduce a gold and silver standard. Linking the currency to gold and silver would prevent big trouble in the future. Based on the current social development of this world, it was more suitable to use gold and silver as the standard. There wouldn't be a problem for at least a few decades. Moreover, when Rinpoche came to this world, he was curious. The currency used on Earth was precious metal, and it was actually the same in this world. In particular, when he found out that the humans were exiled from the other side of the 60,000 mountains, Rinpoche was even more puzzled about how gold and silver were used as currency. It wasn't until a recent discovery in the laboratory in the mountains that he made some conjectures. There was another substance among the gold and silver in this world that was difficult to separate. It was named the singularity, which meant the beginning. This substance, called the singularity, had a very unique characteristic. It could absorb the energy released during the transformation of substances, including potential energy, chemical energy, and electrical energy. The discovery of this strange substance excited everyone in the laboratory, especially the experts in physics, chemistry, and materials science. Each of them immediately became mad scientists and didn't care about anything other than the laboratory every day. This was a huge discovery when they came to this world. It was said that according to the people in the laboratory, they often heard them muttering something like, "Nobar River." Rinpoche couldn't help laughing when he heard this. This group of people seemed to have forgotten something important. However, it was good that they could do their jobs well. Although he hadn't conducted any more experiments after learning about the existence of this substance, Rinpoche guessed that the use of gold and silver as currency was probably the currency system that humans had on the other side of the 60,000 mountains. If that was the case, this substance would probably be very useful. Huge. Alright everyone. That's all. I've said what I wanted to say. As for the time of the auction, it will be tonight at the small arena in the east of the city. Please be prepared. Rinpoche got up and prepared to leave after finishing what he needed to say. Your Highness. Rinpoche turned his head and saw a man in his 30s. If he remembered correctly, his name was Chin Chin. It was very similar to the name of his good friend. However, what really caught Rinpoche's attention was that after he revealed some ideas, the Chin family was the first to transport a large amount of food to and from the two places, setting an example for the other families. Rinpoche had always liked people who were so sensible and tactful. Do you still have any questions? When will this bank start, Your Highness? Our Chin family trusts Your Highness. 3 days later. Rinpoche gave him a smile. How could anyone not like such a sensible person? First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second. Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 993. The last batch of 30 tractors will be sold at 200 taels each for a total of 6,000 taels. Everyone is aware of the rules. This is the last batch of tractors for tonight and also the last chance to bid. Those who are still empty-handed, don't miss it. Following the announcement from the stage, everyone perked up. The auction was held in the arena. Other than the large area, everything else was very simple and crude. However, no one cared about such things at this time. In the previous 20 auctions, 470 tractors had been sold. Some people achieved their wishes while others were surprised. However, the price far exceeded the starting price of 200 taels each from the first auction. 5 tractors were sold for a total of 14,000 taels, which was 14 times the starting price. This exceeded many people's expectations and set the tone for tonight's auction. Although everyone knew that the price wouldn't be as low as 200 taels each, the starting price of 2,800 taels each was still beyond many people's expectations. The last batch of 30 tractors even caused some big families and chambers of commerce to compete for them. They were flaunting their wealth, but not to the families who knew them well, but to Zhao Prince Consort, who was sitting in the VIP room at the top. 67,000 taels. 83,000 taels. 110,000 taels. Is there anyone who wants to raise the price? The person standing on the stage was a member of the Jing tribe. At this moment he scanned the people sitting in the audience with a smile. He knew that 110,000 wasn't the starting price. The previous round had already reached 160,000 taels, and the price for this round should be even higher. Sure enough, as soon as he finished speaking, someone raised his paddle again. When the dust had settled, this batch of tractors was sold for 175,000 taels of silver. This time, the average price of the 500 tractors was close to 4,500 taels. The total price was more than 2 million taels, which was equivalent to 30% of Dayo's annual income. Even the people who waved their gold to bid for these tractors couldn't help but envy his ability to amass wealth. This also made many people feel that Renbaqian's money house wasn't used to cheat people out of money. With such an ability to amass wealth, there was no need for him to do such things at the expense of his reputation, especially when the other party was the royal family. Qing Ji heaved a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had acted early this time. Although he didn't bid for the 30 tractors that were targeted, he managed to bid for a batch of 20 tractors. If he really waited until the end, the family's bottom line wouldn't be able to take down any batch of 30 tractors. No matter what, he could report back to his superiors this time. These 20 tractors were an admission ticket. Just when the crowd was calculating their gains tonight or regretting not making their move earlier, the auctioneer on the stage spoke again. Everyone, the 30 tractors just now were the last batch of tractors, not the finale of tonight's show. What comes next is the highlight of the night. As soon as he finished speaking, many people's eyes lit up. There's actually an important show tonight? He didn't know what it was. One had to know that those tractors had already been sold for more than 2 million taels of silver. The auctioneer kept everyone in suspense. Soon, the final highlight will appear in front of everyone. A group of women from the Jing tribe came to them with plates in their hands. The plate was made of wood and covered with a red cloth. It was hard to tell what was inside, but it seemed to be something very thin. When the red cloth was removed, the answer was revealed. There were only 2 pages of paper on the plate. Or rather, it was a map and a painting. Everyone picked up the drawing and painting and their eyes narrowed. The drawing was a map of the Yun nation. The entire Yun nation was divided into 10 parts and covered with different colors. Among them, the central and eastern parts of the Yun nation had the smallest area covered by each color, but they were the richest areas in the Yun nation. What did this map mean? The painting was of a house and there didn't seem to be anything special about it. The only thing that caught people's attention were the walls and windows of the house. One of the walls was completely made of glass, and sunlight shone directly into the house. There was a strange-looking chair with a semicircle at the bottom, and an old man was lying on it, reading a book. There was a teapot on the coffee table beside him, and outside the room, a child was squatting there with a palm leaf fan to boil water. Just by looking at the painting, one could feel the leisurely and carefree aura of the old man. Another thing that caught people's attention about this painting was that it was too realistic. It was completely different from the paintings on the market, as if a real scene had been cut out and put into the painting. What did this painting in this picture represent? After a moment, someone's eyes lit up. This painting wouldn't be meaningless. The only thing that caught people's attention in this painting was the glass-like wall. Was it related to this? Was it the finale? Everyone gradually had their own guesses. If it was really as they thought, it could indeed be considered the finale. However, what was the meaning of that map of the Yun nation? The auctioneer standing on the stage smiled and said, "I'm sure everyone has seen the items that you have won. Everyone must be guessing what the finale of tonight's show will be. Now, it's my turn to solve the mystery for everyone. Tonight's grand finale is the agency rights for these crystal-like, large-scale glass products that can bring light to everyone. The reason why it's called large-scale glass products is that this includes the rights to sell glass windows, glass doors, glass walls, glass roofs, and even glass houses and glass boats. Glass is a great discovery made by Zhao Prince Consort. Since the invention of glass, it has replaced the original paper windows and doors." Following the auctioneer's incessant bragging, everyone's faces were filled with surprise. Those who had been to Lan City naturally knew about glass. There was no need to say more about its benefits, and the market for this thing was naturally extremely huge. However, only Zhao Prince Consort and Dayo's glass factories knew how to make such crystal-like things. Although some people were tempted, no one dared to have any ideas about it. They didn't expect that this auction would actually involve glass. The question now was, what exactly did the rights to sell mean? Everyone could understand it from the literal meaning, but they wanted to hear the other party's explanation. One had to know that the actual meaning of one word could make a huge difference. Moreover, everyone was only guessing at the moment. In order to let everyone feel the changes and interest that glass brings to life and to let glass enter thousands of households, Zhao Prince Consort has decided to auction the rights to sell large-scale glass products to all of you. As for the agent, that is, the right to sell the products in this region. As long as you have this agency, you will be able to continuously customize the glass products you need and sell them. As you can see from the map, the entire Yun nation is divided into 10 regions, which means that there are a total of 10 rights to sell. In this region, all of you are the only agents. Only all of you can sell and customize these large-scale glass products in this region. No one else will intervene. Everyone, I don't think I need to tell you how much profit this is going to bring, right? This is the only industry with countless prospects, and it's the only one in this region, right? In order to ensure an adequate supply, Zhao Prince Consort will build a glass factory near Pingdu City to supply sufficient goods to all of you. Everyone was ecstatic. Before they came, they absolutely didn't expect such a good thing to happen. Just as the auctioneer said, if one monopolized the entire market in a region, everyone would fight over the prospects and profits. There was definitely no shortage of sales for things like glass. Even if it was just ordinary glass windows, as long as there was enough of it, it would be enough to multiply their net worth several times. As for the quantity, there was no need to consider it at all. How many wealthy households were there in the Yun nation? How big of a market was there? So far, this market was still unoccupied. The only thing that puzzled everyone was that their target this time was the tractor, and all the gold and silver they brought had been used up in the auction just now. Then the auctioneer's next sentence greatly dispelled this doubt. Zhao Prince Consort has taken into account that the rights to sell for a large sum, so he doesn't require you to pay up after the auction. As long as you send the money to Lan City or the banks in Pingdu or Wangjing within a month, you will be able to pay up for this auction. Chapter 994. The competition for the regional distribution rights for the 10 glass products was much more intense than the previous tractors. Even if the tractors weren't bought this time, they could still be bought in a few months to 6 months later. As for the dealership, there wouldn't be another chance if he missed this opportunity. Of course, there was a time limit for this distribution rights, 3 years. However, as long as there was enough production, the market would be saturated in 3 years. For ordinary people, filling their stomachs, getting married, and having children were the most important things. The difference between glass and paper windows wasn't within their consideration. The target group for this product was the rich families of the Yun nation. 3 years was enough to change the appearance of all the windows in their homes. After 3 years, although there would still be a demand, it would be a steady stream. There was no one present who did not understand this principle. As a result, this auction gave Rinpochen a satisfactory answer. 13 million taels of silver. This was the price of the distribution rights alone. In the following years, they would bring him a steady stream of income. Rinpochen left the arena with satisfaction. Although he didn't need to be present for this, he was still very interested in the first investment fair that he organized. That's right. In his opinion, this was actually an investment fair. It was easy to transport small-shaped products like glass cups to the Yun nation for sale. But if he wanted to sell glass windows, it would be more troublesome. He might as well sell the distribution rights and let the people of the Yun nation do this. He could easily reap huge profits. After 3 years, the formula for the glass could also be thrown out. There was no need to keep such things that didn't require much technology in his hands. Not only glass, but many technologies would also be thrown out after he made the biggest profits. Changing the world required the efforts of the people of the world, not a single person who had to do everything himself. After returning to the palace, Rinpochen heard a yell before he entered the bedroom. Woo, 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 it was Erhua's voice. Outside the hall, Zhu Hua, who was wearing silk clothes, was leaning against the wall and dozing off. However, her sleeves and skirt were rolled up. She preferred to wear short skirts and sleeveless clothes, and the outfit she was wearing now made her feel too restrained. Hearing Rinpochen's footsteps, Zhu Hua's eyes were hazy. When she saw Rinpochen's face, she suddenly shivered. Greetings, Principal. Rinpochen was still a deterrent to Zhu Hua. It probably stemmed from her experience of washing toilets for 2 of her 4 years of schooling. A black shadow was swinging back and forth in the air of the hall. There were a few ropes hanging in the hall, and Erhua was holding onto the ropes, mimicking Tarzan. Upon seeing Rinpochen enter, Erhua cheered, let go of the rope and pounced on him. Splat. She lay face down 2 meters in front of Rinpoche. Rinpoche felt the pain just by looking at it. Honeysuckle raised his head. There were no traces on his face, but his small face was full of grievance, and his eyes were full of tears. Rinpoche didn't go forward to hug his daughter. Instead, he covered his ears with both hands and retreated out of the hall at lightning speed. Wow! A cry that was loud enough to tear the roof off spread throughout the entire palace. After a while, 2 flowers finally calmed down. Rinpoche poked his head into the hall and saw Lu Hua sitting on the floor, sobbing and wiping his tears. The empress was sitting on the sofa with a calm look on her face, eating fruits from time to time. "Your Majesty, is this your biological daughter?" Rinpoche asked. "Yes, but I didn't see you catch her," the empress said with a faint smile. Rinpoche spread his hands, picked up his precious heir Hua, and carefully prevented her from punching his chest with her little fists. "I was thinking about something just now and was a little distracted." Rinpoche expressed his innocence. The empress glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. This excuse wasn't sincere at all. "Boo-hoo." Heir Hua's face twitched and the corners of her eyes drooped. She looked like she was about to cry again. "Hey Heir Hua, you're already a big girl. It's time for you to learn to face reality and setbacks," Rinpoche said sincerely, and his face was full of love. "I have never seen a father like you," the empress said sarcastically. "Which father have you seen?" Rinpoche asked. The empress immediately fell into deep thought. At least she had seen her own father before. Even though she couldn't see him most of the time, he was always busy, always very dignified and very fierce. However, he was still good to her. She remembered that she once broke a bottle of his precious medicine and got beaten up. "Do you know, my heart hurts when I beat you up. But after I beat you up, my heart feels much better." After thinking about it, the empress was slightly depressed. "Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore." The empress shook her head and chased away the depression in her heart. She was afraid that if she continued thinking about it, the good impression that the late emperor had left in her heart would disappear. "How's the auction going?" "Your Majesty, guess how much silver did we win this time?" Rinpoche immediately laughed. This was a number that could surprise the empress. One had to know that the income of the imperial family was only about 100,000 taels of silver a year. To describe the imperial family of Dayo as unlucky was a little insulting. To be honest, those chiefs were much wealthier than the imperial family of Dayo. Rinpoche laughed as he put honeysuckle on his neck. Then he felt 2 small hands wrapping around his head and twisting it to one side. He was scared out of his wits and shouted, "Honeysuckle, let go of me." If she were to twist him off. Rinpoche didn't know if the ointment in this world could save a person whose head was twisted 360 degrees. Rinpoche pulled the little fellow down from his neck and slapped her butt. "Did I say that? You're not allowed to hit my chest with your little fists or twist my head. You're not allowed to hit my stomach with your head and act like a spoiled child." Oh. The little fellow was shocked by Rinpoche's stern words and expression, and her eyes were full of tears. "You scared her," the empress said faintly. "She scared me just now." Rinpoche was still a little shaken. "You have been slacking ever since you returned from the 60,000 mountains." In the empress's heart, Rinpoche's cultivation had always been a big problem. However, to Rinpoche, cultivation was for the sake of marrying the empress. Now that he had married the empress, the importance of cultivation was greatly reduced. As for personally stabbing people with a gun, Rinpoche was quite excited for a period of time after experiencing the thrill of being unparalleled. However, it didn't take long for him to put this matter aside. Of course, there was another important result of cultivation, which was to prolong one's lifespan. However, Rinpoche felt that it wouldn't be a problem for him to attain the spirit wheel level. To others, the Tongtian Gate was a hurdle that would allow them to become a dragon overnight if they succeeded and fall into the abyss if they failed. However, for Rinpoche it could be smoothly passed. As long as he cultivated slowly, he would attain the spirit wheel level one day. Then he would just have to wait for the medicine on earth to reverse aging and prolong life. After much difficulty, Rinpoche managed to coax Honeysuckle and threw her to Zhu Hua to rest before the two of them continued their previous conversation. "How much?" The empress's voice was slightly higher. "The tractor and the dealership for glass products, 15 million taels of silver." Rinpoche stretched out his 5 fingers and waved them in the air. "That's equivalent to 2 years of the previous imperial court's income." The empress sighed. Seeing how Rinpoche easily obtained 2 years' worth of income from Dayo's imperial court, the empress began to feel a little unbalanced. Just the glass products alone will bring back more than 10 million taels of profit in the next 3 years. Rinpoche stretched out 2 more fingers and sighed. Now we have the money to build the new palace. The Empress suddenly lifted her leg and kicked Rinpoche off the sofa. What are you doing? Rinpoche fell to the ground in a daze. It's nothing. I feel much better now. After the Empress finished speaking, she thought about it and laughed again. Then she burst out laughing. Chapter 995. He had just looked for an editor to edit it. He had thought that he had written more than 1,000 chapters, but it turned out that there were only 972 chapters. The messed up chapter names of The Pretty Boy of the Empress's Family had been changed. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 997. Rinpoche sent Hua Qinghua off and stared at Hua, who was sitting on the table with a cheerful look on her face. He was pondering over a very important question with a serious look on his face. Should he send her to the clinic? Woo! Hua stretched out her chubby little hands toward Rinpoche for a hug. Don't move. What did you do just now? Rinpoche asked sternly. Looking at Rinpoche's serious expression, Hua pouted and said, Woo? A cry that resounded through half of Lan City engulfed Rinpoche. After a long time, the dizzy Rinpoche carried Hua out of the rearguard commandery. At this time, there were only a few people left in the rearguard commandery who could still breathe. Those who could run had all run. Those who couldn't run had to rely on their bodies. Hua's face had been washed clean, and there was no blackness in her mouth. Rinpoche felt that with Hua's strong physique, she didn't need to go to the clinic. She even ate a third of a solar cell the last time. On the way back to the palace, Hua looked at the shops and pedestrians on the left and right. She kept stretching out her hands and laughing. Unfortunately, Rinpoche didn't dare to let her go. What if she bit someone? There was still a bite mark on Hua's chest. Don't ask Rinpoche how he knew. Hua was about to go crazy. Hua was almost 20 years old and was considered a big girl. In addition, she had always been like a wild girl who liked to compete and be brave. Her body was getting hotter and hotter. In the middle of the night, she ran to Rinpoche and vowed, I quit. Even if you fire me, I won't do it. However, when Rinpoche increased her monthly salary from 100 taels to 200 taels, plus 4 days of rest every month and 3 bottles of the most important beef mince, Hua felt that she could continue working. After returning to the palace, Rinpoche threw Hua to Hua and told her to take care of her before going to look for the Empress. That night, Hua ran in a panic and said, Oh no, the little princess has been poisoned. Rinpoche and the Empress were shocked. In a flash, the Empress disappeared without a trace. Rinpoche frowned and asked, What happened? I don't know. Hua, who had always been wild, was also a little flustered. When the little princess went to the toilet just now, the filth she expelled was all black. Rinpoche's angry face suddenly froze. It was black. Black. Nonsense, he ate half of an inkstone during the day, how could it not be black? At this point in time, the Empress had already flipped out. After all, her biological daughter was poisoned in the palace, so it was natural for her to react violently. At this moment, Rinpoche could already feel the aura coming from the palace beside him. It was as if a huge mountain was pressing down on the entire palace. Everyone in the palace looked in the direction of the aura in shock. The palace guards rushed to the scene. When Rinpoche arrived, half the courtyard was already filled with people. The Empress stood in the middle of the hall and looked at the bucket in front of her. Her face was gloomy as if a thunderbolt was about to strike. Someone, go and inform the doctor to come over immediately. Others, tell me, why did my daughter encounter such a thing in this palace? Rinpoche had just rushed out of the hall when he heard this voice. Immediately he became anxious. This time he had made a huge blunder. He hurriedly shouted in a deep voice, That's right. Why would the princess eat an inkstone in the palace? Which idiot put the inkstone in a place where the princess can reach it? The Water Empress, who was about to strike down with lightning, was stunned when she heard this voice. Her expression immediately turned strange. The aura on her body also began to dissipate. Everyone in the courtyard was at a loss. They couldn't help but look at their surroundings. What exactly happened? Everyone was still in a daze. Aren't you going to investigate? Do you have to wait for Her Majesty to get angry? Rinpoche looked at everyone standing there like wooden blocks and scolded them in exasperation. Yes. Everyone dispersed with a blank look on their faces. What was an inkstone? And where exactly did the little princess eat it? What exactly was going on? Was there anyone who could explain? The guards in the palace were considered high-level intellectuals if they could read large characters. How could they possibly know something as high-end as an inkstone? Rinpoche hurried back to the hall. The empress had a strange look on her face. She was a little playful, a little angry, and a little glad. Tell me what happened. The empress's face turned gloomy when she saw Rinpoche. It seemed like he knew what was going on, but he didn't tell her? Almost caused a storm? Congratulations, Your Majesty. Not only did Hua display the greatest talent in martial arts in 10,000 years, but he also showed a strong interest in knowledge. Rinpoche laughed. Stare. The empress looked straight into his eyes and waited for him to say something. If you want to be a scholar, you have to have some knowledge. Rinpoche laughed dryly. Then she ate half of the ink stone. Rinpoche spread his hands. The empress was confused. Rinpoche was speechless. Zhu Hua, who hurried over, shrank her neck. She suddenly felt a little cold, and the atmosphere in the hall was a little strange. After a while, the empress left in a hurry. Zhao Prince Consort used some strength to pull himself up from the ground. Then he pulled Hua off the wall. Wah! Another cry that awakened the entire palace and half of Lan City was heard. Although there were no trivial matters in the royal family, what happened in Dayo's harem was indeed a trivial matter. There were only two things that were most important to Rinpoche. One was to recruit 50,000 laborers from Tianjin Basin to build the new city. The daily necessities of these people weren't trivial matters, especially when it came to transporting them from Tianjin Basin to the new city. It was a journey of thousands of kilometers and tens of thousands of people. This was a test of the ability of Dayo's officials. The other matter was the mother machine that the sword masters were making. It had to be said that these sword masters were indeed talented in this aspect. If they didn't have swords in their hands, they would be seen grabbing hair, pulling collars, spitting and punching each other. When they held swords in their hands, they immediately became peerless sword immortals. A strand of hair in their hands could be cut into 16 pieces. After spending 2 years learning all kinds of knowledge with their ability to absorb, they could at least reach the level of a master's degree. Coupled with their superb hands-on ability and exquisite control, they had become professional talents with superb hands-on ability that amazed even the experts. In particular, those flying swords that came at the command of the experts were so shocked that their jaws almost dropped. No matter how many times they saw it, they couldn't reduce the shock in their hearts. They felt that Darwin's and Newton's coffins couldn't hold on any longer. The existence of flying swords simply challenged their outlook on life, values, and worldview. Of course, they should have abandoned these things after coming to this world. It just so happened that the equipment in the laboratory was still relatively scarce, so someone proposed the concept of a mother machine in an attempt to make more sophisticated equipment. These sword masters also understood the importance of a mother machine from the knowledge that they had learned. The rest of the matter took its natural course. With a few spirit wheel sword masters as the main force and many earth wheel sword masters as assistants, it took them half a month to create the first milling machine with a processing accuracy of 0.1 millimeters. When Rinpoche found out about this, they were already thinking about how to make a milling machine with an accuracy of 0.06 millimeters. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second. Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 999. Rinpoche pushed aside some matters and took 2 days to go to the laboratory. He also brought along the little princess Hua. Normally, parents in the city would want to take their children to the suburbs. Although the palace wasn't small, it was still too small for this world. Rinpoche also hoped that she could see more things. Just like ordinary parents, they had a lot in common when it came to treating their children. Hua wasn't as excited and eager as she was when she first left the palace. Although the boundless plains and fields made people feel free, in the eyes of this little fellow, there was nothing new and interesting. Occasionally, when Rinpoche wasn't paying attention, she would grab some strange things and stuff them into her mouth. For example, bugs on grass stalks, for example, a three-eyed toad, for example, a butterfly the size of a palm that was flying, for example, a bug that looked like a beetle on a tree, his chubby little palm pressed up and grabbed, and with a flip of his hand he threw it directly into his mouth. Her eyes narrowed. Rinpoche could feel the happiness in her expression. This happiness lasted until they entered the mountain. This mountain was originally called Mount Natu, and the meaning of the name was obvious. It was very simple and straightforward. Rinpoche waved his hand and changed it to Mount Zhongsher, which was actually Mount End. After all, everything in this world would start from here. From the name, one could see Rinpoche's expectations for the laboratory here. The laboratory was halfway up the mountain, and there were soldiers guarding the foot of the mountain. A cement road went straight to the mountainside, and at the top, the winged cavalry were the guards. Besides the lack of Cardinal Heaven experts, the security here was second only to that of the palace. Coupled with a few spirit wheel sword masters in the laboratory, the security here wasn't much weaker than that of the palace except for the empress. When Rinpoche arrived at the mountainside and got off his mount, Erhua cried out and jumped into the forest the moment he turned around. "Find her and bring her back," Rinpoche ordered the guards around him. Now that the murderers on the mountain had almost been eliminated, it was rare to even see a man-will expert. With Erhua's skills, she naturally wouldn't be in any danger. However, as soon as he entered the laboratory, he heard a cry from afar. Rinpoche scuttled out of the courtyard. In less than a minute, he saw Zhu Hua returning with Erhua in her arms. Erhua's eyes were filled with tears. He was crying with snot and tears and he kept spitting out saliva. "This is..." She ate the stinky turtle. Zhu Hua had a gloating look on his face. Who told her to bite his chest? Who wasn't a young girl? Rinpoche? Stinky turtle was a type of insect the size of 2-finger joints. According to the records of the Han Dynasty, there was a street in ancient Chang, and called Zhangtai. There were many brothels on the street, and the term Zhangtai originated from this street. It wasn't surprising that there was such a term in this world. However, Rinpoche was still a little surprised that there was actually a term called Zhangtai. He just didn't know if it meant what he thought it meant. "Brothel?" Rinpoche asked. Zhen Yong replied calmly, "A high-end, grand and classy brothel. It's not a place like a brothel. Children are ignorant." Rinpoche was surprised. This requirement wasn't low. To build a brothel in such a remote place? To specifically serve them? As if reading Rinpoche's mind, Zhen Yong said bluntly, "We want a prosperous world, not this desolate place. What's the difference between this and my previous life?" Rinpoche thought for a while and asked, "Do you want to get married?" Zhen Yong rolled his eyes and replied, "Not interested." "Actually, I'm still interested." Du Mingyang muttered. "What do you know? How can a domestic flower be better than a wildflower?" Zhen Yong turned his head and scolded. "You have to have a domestic flower first." Du Mingyang was obviously unconvinced. Rinpoche thought about it and agreed. "All right, I agree." At most, he would move to a brothel from the Yun nation. "Your Highness is very loyal." Zhen Yong was overjoyed and gave a thumbs up. Rinpoche smiled and changed the topic to the milling machine that they were currently making. "How is it? Can you make a 0.1 mm precision milling machine?" "It will take some effort and it will be scrapped if you're not careful," Zhen Yong said frankly. "However, it can still be made with some time. When I see a brothel, I will definitely let you see a 0.1 mm precision milling machine." "That's not enough. A 0.1 mm precision milling machine can't meet my requirements," Rinpoche said with a smile. Zhen Yong furrowed his eyebrows, frowned, and thought for a moment before gritting his teeth and saying, 0.07 mm precision is the most I can achieve without relying on other tools." Rinpoche laughed when he heard this. These people still had room to exploit. In fact, machines with a 0.01 mm precision could be found everywhere on Earth. They could only be considered street goods, and it was very easy for him to bring them over. However, technology would progress little by little. Otherwise, it would be a castle in the air. Being able to achieve this in such a short time in such a simple environment was enough to satisfy Rinpoche. These people were really treasures. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second. Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 1000. Rinpoche came to the laboratory not only to look at the machine tools but also to obtain a thick stack of data. This included standard atmospheric pressure, gravity, elemental table, air composition, soil composition, and so on. This was the basis of the development of science and technology in this world. For these things, 3 experts went to the Yun nation under the protection of the winged cavalry warriors. Not to mention the novelty of what they saw and heard along the way, this data would at least allow Rinpoche to modify some of the teaching materials at the academy. For example, the atmospheric pressure in this world was 1 times that of Earth. However, Rinpoche had done experiments at the academy and found that the boiling point of water was about 106 degrees Celsius, which meant that Lan City was more than 1,000 meters above sea level. At the same time, the gravity in this world was slightly higher than that of Earth. These experts felt more tired when they first came to this world than on Earth. According to their observations and some speculations, the planet in this world was larger than Earth, rotated faster than Earth, and was further away from the star than from Earth to the Sun. As for the specific data, it would take a long time to come up with it. The air in this world was composed of only 72% nitrogen and 25% oxygen. There was one more rare gas than on Earth, which made up a total of 4%. The biggest difference between this world and Earth was that there was an important gas in the air that made up more than 5%. This gas was very active at high temperatures and could easily react with a variety of elements. Rinpoche stayed at Zongshishan for a night and approved 2 batches of experts' applications to expand the sampling area. The next day he returned to Lan City with the thick stack of data. With these people he had a lot less to worry about. As expected, professional matters should be left to the professionals to handle. After returning to Lan City, Rinpoche stopped for a while on Jingyang Street. There were 3 gates and 4 roads in Lan City. The intersection of the 4 roads was in the middle, which was also the most prosperous area in the entire city. A little south of this intersection, there was a 3-story brick building that was much taller than the other 2-story buildings. The bricks were decorated with large pieces of white jade. White jade was still stone, but its color was similar to white jade. It was a mineral deposit that had been discovered during a recent mine exploration and was more valuable as a decoration than its original material. This small building was 6 storefronts wide, and with the white jade decorations, it looked quite luxurious. It could be said that in the eyes of most people, the most luxurious building in Lan City was this newly built shop with the word silver hanging on its door. He even introduced his favorite console, the PS666, to Honeysuckle. Of course he emphasized on games. Honeysuckle obviously didn't listen to those words. He stared at the game console with interest for a while, then poked it with his finger to make sure it was real. Then he revealed his white teeth. Rinpoche had just sat down for 3 minutes when he saw Rinxia running over in a panic and complaining, "She ate my game console, did you eat it?" Renwanyan looked at him and found it funny. "Then let her eat it." Obviously, there was a serious discrepancy between what he thought and the reality. Rinpoche slapped his forehead and disappeared from the sofa. Honeysuckle was sitting on the floor and chewing happily. Chips, metal shells and other fragments kept popping out of his mouth. All that was left on the floor were these scraps. The Empress was 1 step ahead of Rinpoche. When Rinpoche arrived, she had already picked up Honeysuckle and slapped his butt a few times. Rinpoche thought for a while and decided to appease the Empress before letting Honeysuckle spit out those things. Fortunately, it was the game console that I bit and not Rinxia. The Empress's hand paused for a moment, then she slapped him even harder. Meanwhile, Renwanyan's face changed color. For the rest of the day, Honeysuckle sat beside the Empress. However, it was as if there were nails under his butt and he couldn't sit steadily. His body swayed left and right and his eyeballs kept rolling. Even if his butt wasn't swollen, she still couldn't sit steadily. Honeysuckle was astonishingly full of energy and curiosity. He was curious about everything around him almost all the time. The others looked at Honeysuckle in surprise. After all, a child who could eat a game console in a few mouthfuls was amazing enough. The family gathering ended just like that, and Honeysuckle left a deep impression on everyone. Compared to the scene of sweeping away everything they heard, this family gathering gave everyone a more direct understanding of this little fellow. After that auction, Rinpoche sold 2 more batches of tractors, totaling 3,000 tractors. Among them, 1,000 were given to the Aboriginals. Similarly, after that auction, the Aboriginals' enthusiasm for tractors finally exploded. Although tractors weren't cost-effective in agriculture, they had irreplaceable value in long-distance transportation. Of course, the long-distance transportation company that Rinpoche set up played an important role in this. This was also the prototype of logistics. The Jing tribe was responsible for lobbying merchants in the Yun nation to transport goods to Lan City through the transportation company. This saved them the trouble of setting up their own caravans, and it also allowed merchants who weren't strong enough to transport goods between the two places, invigorating the market. Since Rinpochen applied many of the mature rules and regulations of the logistics company from the very beginning, the long-distance transportation company, which appeared to be quite formal from the beginning, gained the recognition of a large number of small and medium-sized merchants in a very short period of time, and a steady stream of transportation orders followed. Not only did they transport goods but they also transported people. Although it wasn't very comfortable, comfort wasn't the most important thing for those small and medium-sized merchants. With a sufficient market, the transportation company would naturally develop and grow in a short period of time. Having a tractor was a ticket to enter the long-distance transportation company. It could be said that Rinpochen had put in a lot of effort for the Aboriginals. He had used all kinds of methods. However, he could also understand that these reckless and straightforward people took a long time to accept new things. After this new initiative was announced, at first, only the various families and a small number of Aboriginals participated with the mentality of trying it out. After the first batch of people saw the sweetness, more Aboriginal people finally became enthusiastic. In just a few months, this long-distance transportation company had set up a fleet of nearly 1,000 tractors to transport goods between the two places. Including the families and big merchants from the Yun nation, there were thousands of tractors traveling on this national highway every day. What followed were all kinds of traffic accidents. For example, people used their feet to hold the tractor's nose firmly in place and swung it to hit people. Some people used the tractor to drift, some people carried the tractor to forcibly overtake other cars. There were also 2 tractors traveling side by side and fighting while driving. The most amazing thing was that 4 people carried 2 tractors and kicked each other while running wildly. Due to the collision, the 2 tractors couldn't move, which resulted in such a scene. All these situations were an eye-opener for Rinpochen. It had to be said that every world had its own way of playing. After accepting the new concept of tractors, the Aboriginals also burst out with amazing creativity, and a large number of magical old drivers from another world emerged. The tractor, coupled with their strong individual strength, made them look like they were racing cart riders. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second. Booksellers Mobile. After some time, Hua Qinghua finally saw Zidonglai. Zidonglai was a handsome man who looked to be in his 30s. His face looked as if it had been carved by a knife or an axe. It was angular, and his eyes were full of spirit. If one were to say that Zidonglai was the most handsome man of the Aboriginals, there wouldn't be many people who would object. Even Hua Qinghua was momentarily dazed when she saw Zidonglai. Imperial Inspector? Never heard of it. Why are you here? Zidonglai sat at the seat of honor and asked faintly. Hua Qinghua became serious and took out an imperial edict. The gist of it was that the imperial inspector was responsible for investigating the conflicts and contradictions between the Aboriginals and the Yun Nation people in the Yun Nation, as well as investigating the harassment of the civilians by the soldiers of the Protectorate of the Northeast. Zidonglai's eyes flickered and turned a little colder. Is this the intention of Her Majesty or Zhao Prince Consort? Since it was personally written by Her Majesty, it naturally has her intention. Hua Qinghua flipped the imperial edict over and showed it to Zidonglai. The Yun nation is newly settled, and there are many revolts among the civilians, Zidonglai said with a cold face. In fact, Zidonglai always had a cold face. It's one thing to rebel, but it's another thing for the soldiers of the Protectorate of Yun nation to harass the civilians. Hua Qinghua took out another piece of paper from her waist and said, on the 11th of September, Commandant Tai Fengbao beat up a local merchant, Li Jingwen, after drinking in a brothel, seriously injuring him. On the 19th of September, Commandant Qin Hui's soldiers collided with someone on the road and started a fight with the local people. Huang Chu, Shindu, and 13 other people were seriously injured. On the 6th of October, Commandant Su Sanhua and his soldiers beat up 4 scholars, Yuan Qing, Lu Dong, and 2 others in a restaurant. After that, their names were left behind and had a bad influence. 11th of October. Enough. You're well prepared. They are all my soldiers. What are you going to do about it, Imperial Inspector? Zidonglai waved his hand and interrupted Hua Qinghua. In the past 3 months, There have been 13 cases of harassment of civilians in Pingdu alone. There are even more cases in the entire Yun nation. According to Her Majesty's order, these people must be punished according to military law. Moreover, they must be punished in an eye-catching place in the city to serve as a warning to others. They should be punished according to military law. Even if it's an order from Her Majesty, I won't accept it. Zidonglai stood up after finishing his sentence. All of you may leave. Protector Z, are you going to defy the order? Hua Qinghua moved in front of Zidonglai in a flash. How dare you? The guards in the tent were furious. You dare to stop me? Zidonglai looked at Hua Qinghua with a dangerous coldness in his eyes. Protector Z, the order is from Her Majesty. I, the Imperial Inspector, have the duty to investigate such matters. Hua Qinghua blocked his way without backing down. If you defy the order, Her Majesty will definitely be furious. I, Zidonglai, and the soldiers of the Protectorate have made great contributions to the Yun nation. Even if I have some flaws, I can't be punished in public. I refuse to accept Her Majesty's order. You can go back and report to Her Majesty. If Her Majesty wants to punish me, I'm willing to accept it. Hua Qinghua saw that Zidonglai had made up his mind and gritted her teeth. She had just arrived, but Protector Z had already refused to accept the order. This job was indeed difficult. Just as she was feeling angry, she felt a strong force pushing her away. Zidonglai waved his hand in the air, causing her to retreat several steps. By the time Hua Qinghua came back to her senses, Zidonglai had already left the tent. Hua Qinghua quickly chased after him. Stop. Zidonglai's guard stopped Hua Qinghua. I have Her Majesty's order, so I can move freely. Who can stop me? Hua Qinghua sneered and took out the order from her pocket. The guard's morale immediately stagnated. Zidonglai glanced at her, snorted coldly, and left without bothering with her. However, he didn't expect Hua Qinghua to follow him blindly. Whether he was eating or sleeping, Hua Qinghua would definitely appear by his side and read out the Empress's orders from time to time. If it were someone else, Zidonglai would have killed them with a slap. However, Hua Qinghua had the Empress's order. After a period of time, Zidonglai was quite annoyed. He couldn't beat her up or chase her away, so he simply instructed the guards to curse at Hua Qinghua and force her to retreat. He didn't expect Hua Qinghua to curse so badly that the guards couldn't open their mouths. However, Zidonglai couldn't do as the imperial edict said and let the soldiers receive military law in the streets and be surrounded by the people of the Yun nation. This was the stubbornness of a general. No matter what they had done, they were still his soldiers. How could he allow them to be humiliated in front of others? The two sides continued to be in a deadlock. When Rinpochen received the news, he felt rather helpless. Hua Qinghua's dogskin plaster tactic was suggested by him. After all, Zidonglai was extremely famous and had made great contributions. Even the Empress wouldn't easily touch him. However, if these matters weren't dealt with, the people of the Yun nation would always be hostile to the Aboriginals. In order to absorb a nation as a part of Dayo, a combination of strength and gentleness had to be used. Rewards and punishments had to be fair. Zidonglai had no choice but to make such a move. Now he just had to wait and see how long Zidonglai could endure. Rinpochen put this aside and waited for Zidonglai's reaction. He still had too many things to do and couldn't put too much energy into this. A year had passed and the two were still in a deadlock. Hua Qinghua moved directly to the Protectorate and was like Zidonglai's shadow every day. Even Zidonglai's guards and the generals from the Protectorate were used to her presence. Hua Qinghua never forgot her duties. Almost every day she would read the Empress's orders to Zidonglai. At the same time, she would also get her subordinates to bring news of the harassment of the people by the Protectorate soldiers. Perhaps it was due to her efforts, but such incidents seemed to have decreased in the past 6 months. 2 years had passed and Rinpochen sometimes almost forgot about this matter. Today he had just finished looking at the phone sample that had just been produced and asked about Hua Qinghua's current situation. He didn't expect Zidonglai to be able to hold on for so long, which made Rinpochen feel rather helpless. Your Highness, I just received news that Protector General Z is going to marry Hua Duka in 3 months. Rinpochen was confused. Rinpochen's expression suddenly became extremely interesting. He felt depressed and didn't know what to say. That feeling was as if he had been F***ed. Chapter 1004. 4 hours ago. Below the Dayo Palace, there were many underground tunnels that looked like a spider's web. At this moment, a small figure was walking in the tunnels with her body bent. Even though it was pitch black, she didn't bump into the walls even once. Her long hair was tied into a ponytail. Her hair was originally 4 meters long, but after being accidentally tangled in a certain area, she finally endured the pain and cut it into ankle-length short hair. Honeysuckle's eyes seemed to emit some kind of light in the darkness. From time to time, she would identify the direction at the intersection, or reach out to grab a bug from the soil at the side and throw it into her mouth. She would also listen to the sounds above her head and push away the soil above her to identify her position. After spending half an hour, Honeysuckle realized that there was no way forward. There was a huge rock blocking her way and there was light coming from the edge of the rock. Wow! Honeysuckle cheered. She went forward and pushed the rock with her meaty little palm, creating a gap. Honeysuckle squeezed out of the gap and realized that this place was completely different from the places she had seen before. It was a courtyard surrounded by stone walls. There was a river, a rock garden, and many ice blocks piled there. A white bear was lying comfortably on top of the ice cubes. The moment it saw Honeysuckle, the bear raised its head, let out a roar, and revealed a mouth full of sharp teeth. Honeysuckle looked curiously at the white animal in front of her. In her memory, her father seemed to have brought her to see it before. Honeysuckle curiously moved closer and wanted to touch it. In her past experience, the furry things she had touched included the roaring emperor, Tian Tian, Gun Gun, and the golden retriever. All of them allowed her to pinch them. However, the white bear in front of her was obviously different from the ones she had seen before. The tasty little fellow in front of it seemed to remind it of its days in the wild. It stood on its hind legs and let out a warning roar at Honeysuckle. Seeing that Honeysuckle approached it fearlessly and tried to seize its territory, the enraged white bear raised its huge paw and swung it at the little fellow. Honeysuckle, who had encountered such a situation for the first time, was at a loss. Her small figure in front of the huge white bear felt like she was facing a giant in a fairy tale. She allowed the huge bear's paw to reach her side before she hurriedly threw a punch as if she had just woken up from a dream. Crack! The front limbs of the white bear were twisted into strange shapes, and the white bear let out a mournful roar. The fear of being slapped by a woman in red all those years ago resurfaced in his mind. The white bear shuddered and gave up its precious land, the ice mountain, and curled its body into a ball. Honeysuckle, who had just been startled, was a little annoyed. Looking at the white bear that had curled up into a ball, he wanted to bully it, but he couldn't bear to do so. He thought about how he wouldn't be out for too long this time, and how excited he was about the outside world, so he suppressed the thought of bullying the bear. With a tap of his toes, he jumped over the wall. He wandered aimlessly around the beast park. He couldn't tell where he was going and had to hide whenever he saw someone. A few children were playing not far away. One of the children was facing the punches and kicks of the other children. In just a few moves, he had beaten the other children to the ground, causing their heads to bleed. The adults in the distance did not seem to care. They only laughed when they saw this and praised the strongest child. Tai Tu, you're the strongest among these kids. You might even become a high-ranking official in the future. Honeysuckle curled his lips in the dark. He was much stronger than him. He only needed one hand, no, one little finger to press him to the ground. However, his father and mother had never praised him like this before. This simple praise actually made Honeysuckle feel a little envious. The small figure first jumped onto a house. From here he could see the main gate. After identifying the direction, he lightly jumped down again. Only half of his hair fell. Honeysuckle's hair was unexpectedly caught by something. He only fell about a meter high before he was suspended in the air. Although no one saw such a delicate little person hanging there, Honeysuckle, who was suspended in the air, looked at the top of his head and then at the bottom of his feet. His mouth twitched and he almost cried. Fortunately, he remembered that he was sneaking out of the palace, so he forcefully held back his tears. He grabbed his hair alternately with both hands and climbed up just like that. The roof of the beast park was made of wood and straw. Honeysuckle's hair was caught by a piece of wood. After discovering the culprit, Honeysuckle pouted and angrily broke the wood to free his hair. Crack! Who's there? Honeysuckle was startled when he heard the shout from below. He quickly dashed in the direction he was looking for previously. The people below only saw a small figure disappear in a flash. They were immediately startled and shouted loudly, immediately attracting the attention of others. However, he didn't even see the figure clearly. He only saw a shadow and couldn't tell who it was. He only remembered that the person seemed to be very small. However, No one expected that it was the little princess who had sneaked out of the palace. After discussing it, they reported it to the chief and then to their superiors. At this time, Honeysuckle had already disappeared. She saw the palace when she went out of the door. Then she knew which direction to go. After all, her father had brought her out of the palace more than once or twice. She more or less remembered the way. After avoiding the square in front of the palace, Honeysuckle immediately cheered when she arrived at Jingyang Street. Wow! She had finally sneaked out. Looking at the surging crowd in front of her, Honeysuckle felt excited from the bottom of her heart. Although she had seen it before, it was in her father's arms every time. She had never seen it so clearly and so close to her. The cheerful Honeysuckle immediately pounced into the surging crowd like a husky that had escaped its reins. After walking for a short distance, Honeysuckle's eyes narrowed. There was a fragrance. What a fragrant smell. Following the direction of the fragrance, she could smell that it was coming from a small building. If she could read, she would have recognized the 3 words Shanhui House on the small building. Although Honeysuckle was illiterate on her first trip out, she remembered that she had smelled the fragrance from this house when she was in her father's arms. Squatting on the opposite side, she saw a few youths walk in with their heads held high. Not long after, a few more youths walked out with their heads held high. Honeysuckle immediately knew what was going on. Mimicking them, Honeysuckle walked through the crowd with her head held high. However, when she saw a bunch of tables and people sitting around them, Honeysuckle was dumbfounded. What should she do next? Girl, what do you want to eat? The one who spoke was a burly and fierce-looking waiter. The scar on his face twitched as he spoke. In other places, he would definitely be a character that would stop children from crying at night. At this moment, he was also sizing up the young girl who looked to be around 7 or 8 years old. She wore a white silk dress on the inside and a blue muslin dress on the outside. This kind of dress was not something that ordinary people could afford. Only the young ladies in Shanhui House could afford to wear it. Her hair was tied into a single ponytail that reached the back of her ankles, and her small face was extremely exquisite. Needless to say, she was the son of some big shot in the imperial court. An ordinary family would not be able to raise such a child. From the blank look on her face, it was obvious that she rarely went out. Miss, please take a seat first. What would you like to eat? The burly man tried his best to make himself look pleasant. Honeysuckle looked around blankly and thought for a moment. The most delicious. Spiced lamb leg, braised lamb trotters, medium well-roasted beef and wild vegetable lamb stew. These are all the best. These are all recipes from the palace. The burly man said in a low, muffled voice. The palace? Honeysuckle pondered. Was the palace her home? Honeysuckle was a little uncertain. After thinking for a moment, Honeysuckle decided to eat first. I want all of them. All right, the burly man said loudly. Most aboriginals were big eaters. The more powerful they were, the more food they could eat. Honeysuckle slammed the table and pouted. I don't want to eat this. Change another table. The waiter from before took a look and immediately removed the items on the table without any hesitation. This is our restaurant's most famous dish. If you don't like it, what else do you want to eat? Hua rolled his eyes and looked around, then pointed at a table and said, I want those from them. The waiter immediately reported the menu. Honeysuckle slammed the table and yelled, I want to drink. Hearing this, the surrounding people immediately burst into laughter. Little girl, how much can you drink? Someone laughed and shouted. Honeysuckle knew that everyone was calling him, but he didn't know what they were laughing about. When he heard the question, he immediately raised a finger. A bowl or a jar? Someone asked with a smile. It wasn't a big deal for Aboriginal children to drink a little wine. However, seeing such a cute little girl sitting at the table and asking for wine like a little adult was quite amusing. I can drink as much as I want, Honeysuckle said in her cute voice. Pfft. Hearing this, everyone immediately burst into laughter. Little girl, you're bragging, right? If you don't believe me, I'll show you. Give me wine. Honeysuckle was immediately unhappy when she heard someone questioning her. Ah, little girl, I'll treat you to a drink. Drink it first before we talk about anything else. Someone at the table next to her handed over half a jar of wine. It was the kind that contained 5 caddies of wine. Half a jar wasn't a small amount. Honeysuckle looked at the huge jar and was immediately dumbfounded. In the palace, she always drank the Empress's wine in secret, and they were all glass bottles. How was she going to drink such a big jar? Seeing her dumbfounded expression, everyone laughed again. Honeysuckle turned her head to see how the others drank. Coincidentally, she saw someone pouring wine from a jar and understood. She jumped onto a stool and poured herself a bowl of wine from the jar. Then she raised the bowl and drank it in one gulp. Good. Little girl, you're straightforward. Everyone cheered again. Honeysuckle frowned. It wasn't as good as the one she drank in secret. However, she quickly cheered up again. No one was here to control her, and she wouldn't be scolded by the Empress and her father. She poured another bowl and drank it in one gulp. Seeing that she wanted to drink again, someone said, "Drink slowly, there's no rush." Honeysuckle wrinkled her nose. They had just said that she was bragging. She ignored them. Seeing that she drank another cup, everyone immediately cheered. It was rare for something interesting to happen in Shanhui House. Little girl, your face isn't even red. You can really drink. I wonder who taught you. Come, let's drink. A burly man laughed heartily and came over, clinking his bowl with honeysuckles. Seeing this, Honeysuckle became even more excited. Seeing that she really wasn't drunk at all, everyone took advantage of their enthusiasm and clinked glasses with her. Although Honeysuckle was surrounded by people every day in the palace, it was different here. Although the people here were a little rough, their enthusiasm and hearty laughter ignited something in her heart. Furthermore, she seemed to sense an unfamiliar emotion from these people's words: approval. In the palace, the Empress and her father treated her like a child. The people here were different. After Honeysuckle drank half the jar of wine, someone brought another jar of wine and invited her to drink. Shanhui House became even more lively. Everyone also began to see something different. It was true that Aboriginal children could drink a little, but this child had drunk so much without any reaction. This meant that her strength was far beyond that of an ordinary person. At the very least, she wasn't at the four-way heaven level. That meant that she was at the Kismet heaven level. To be able to reach the Kismet heaven stage at such a young age, only a few geniuses could compare to him, right? For example, Shurgan from the Great Elder's family and Tong Lan from Minister Tong's family. No one knew which family this girl belonged to, but she was actually so powerful. However, everyone was relieved. Since she was at the Kismet heaven level, they didn't have to worry about her drinking. With this little girl around, Shanhui House was especially lively today. Even the second floor was affected by the people downstairs. Someone hurried downstairs and saw a fair and delicate child standing on a stool with one foot on the table and the other on it. She was drinking bowl after bowl of wine. Many regulars of Shanhui House were cheering at the side, and every time, someone would drink with her. In just a short while, there was a pile of wine jars on the floor. "Lu San, if you keep drinking, you'll lose all of your food money for this month." "I can't lose to such a little girl. That would be embarrassing," the person called Lu San said fiercely. In fact, he had already lost a jar of wine to Honeysuckle, but he stubbornly refused to stop. The rich and powerful children who had come down to investigate went up and told them about this matter. Everyone else became curious and came down to see this little girl who could drink so much. "Which family is she from? Do you know?" "I've never seen her before." "Have you seen her before?" "No." "This little girl is interesting. I'll go up and drink with her." "So many of you are taking turns to fight a little girl. Aren't you embarrassed?" "This girl is interesting. Look at her. She drank so much, but she's completely fine. I heard she just said that she could keep drinking. I want to see what she's talking about." At this moment, Honeysuckle was very happy. She had never felt so carefree in her life. In her eyes, everyone here was a good person. Chapter 1007. When Ren Baqian entered Shanhui House, everyone subconsciously made way for him. "That was Yu Qing just now," Ren Baqian said bluntly. It was rare that he didn't call her Hua. Even without him saying it, everyone knew that it was the little princess. Ren Baqian smiled at everyone and said, "This child has been in the palace for a long time and always wants to see the outside world. She sneaked out today." Everyone thought of this as well. When they saw her, they knew that she was a child who sneaked out from a wealthy family. She didn't understand anything in this world and often had a blank expression on her face. She looked adorable and made people want to pinch her. Those who had this thought were glad that they didn't pinch her. They regretted it after thinking about it. If only they had pinched her, they would have something to brag about in the future. I also pinched the face of the current princess. After more than 100 years it would become, I also pinched the face of the current empress. Thinking about it, it would be so cool to say it. Those people regretted it even more when they thought about it. Seeing that all of you like her, I'm very happy as a father. After all, she is my daughter. Ren Baqin laughed. Everyone laughed as well. However, the next time you see her, you still have to report to the palace early. You know the importance of her identity, Ren Baqin added. Don't worry, Zhao Prince Consort. If anyone wants to hurt the little princess, they have to do it over our dead bodies first. Someone immediately said. That's right. Never let anyone hurt the little princess. Everyone agreed. It's not just because of this. Her Majesty will also be worried if she finds out that she sneaked out of the palace, Ren Baqin continued. In fact, he wasn't very worried about Heir Hua's safety in Lan City. In any case, she was their child. Understood. Hearing that Her Majesty was mentioned, everyone looked solemn and said, if you see the little princess sneaking out again, you must report to the palace. Ren Baqin nodded, picked up the wine jar and bowl that Qi Yuqing had drunk from, and poured himself a cup. Today is a good day and I'll drink with all of you. After saying that, he downed the cup. When the wine entered his stomach, Ren Baqin understood that it was about 23 to 24 degrees. Following which, Ren Baqin smiled at everyone and said, today's wine is on my daughter. I won't be paying for it. Everyone immediately scratched their heads and laughed. Zhao Prince Consort, what are you talking about? Ren Baqin nodded at everyone before leaving. He was really happy, which was why he said so much. As for the reason, it was simple. It was obvious that these people liked Two Flowers very much. This is the joy of being a father. These people were the descendants of officials, and in the future they would also become officials in the imperial court. This scene made him feel that when Heir Hua grew up, he could also become an emperor who was as prestigious as the empress and loved by the officials and people. When he came here, he was prepared for a mixed doubles match. However, after seeing the scene in Shanhuai House, the anger in Ren Baqin's heart disappeared without a trace, and he changed his mind. Even though he had changed his mind, the empress hadn't. Ren Baqin was still at the palace gate when he heard a cry coming from inside. Doubtlessly, Honeysuckle was beaten up again. Upon entering the palace, he saw the palace guards standing there obediently, not even daring to breathe loudly. The fury of the empress made them feel pressured. Ren Baqin smiled and paced around the palace slowly. He wasn't in a hurry to go back and see his daughter get beaten up. After a while, when Heir Hua's crying and laughter stopped, Ren Baqin went back. He saw the empress sitting there with a cold expression. He couldn't see any anger, but it was still very cold. Heir Hua was sitting on a small stool with a small table in front of her. She was obediently copying the three-character classic. Ren Baqin looked at Heir Hua's movements and knew that she was suspended in the air. He reckoned that her butt was swollen from being beaten by the empress and didn't dare to sit. Xianzhe will be back in 2 days. At that time, it won't be easy for her to escape. Ren Baqin smiled at the empress. Xianzhe. The empress relaxed a little when she heard this name. It had been 3 years. Back then, the empress had sent her and Lin Xiaola to the mines in a fit of anger. It was about time for them to return. The empress always felt that Xianzhe was more trustworthy. Just like Qing Yuan and Hong Luan, who were lively and clever back then, they were now 30 years old. However, the empress was still reluctant to let them out of the palace. As for the two of them, they were used to staying in the palace and had no intention of going out. Has your Majesty regretted letting her out for so many years? Ren Baqin asked with a smile as he sat opposite the empress. The empress rolled her eyes at him. Whose fault was this? She said, meritorious service should be rewarded, and mistakes should be punished. Heir Hua, who was at the side, pricked up her ears and listened to the conversation between her father and mother. Who was Xianzhe? She stopped what she was doing. The empress glanced at her and Heir Hua shivered. She pouted her lips and continued copying the three-character classic with a look of deep hatred. She hated the person who wrote this book to the core. 2 days later, 2 women sat on jumping sheep and entered the city under the protection of a group of guards. One of them was wearing shabby clothes, a pair of glasses, and her hair was tied up simply at the back of her head. She looked around curiously. It had changed. It was very different from before she left. Chapter 1008. Xinjia Lin Xiaola received the decree. As soon as Xinjia and Lin Xiaola entered the palace, they were stopped by a group of guards. Apart from the leader, there was another person behind him carrying a tray. Xinjia was stunned. She cupped her hands respectfully and said, Xinjia accepts the decree. Her Majesty has decreed that Xinjia will be reinstated as the commander of the Imperial Palace Guards and Lin Xiaola will be reinstated as the librarian of Qingxin Palace Hall. The two of them will take up their posts immediately. The Imperial Guard cupped his hands at the two of them and said, Congratulations, Commander and Librarian Lin. His Majesty wants the two of you to take a bath and change your clothes before having an audience with him. Yes, Xinjia replied. He lowered his head and looked at his shabby clothes. It was indeed not suitable for him to meet His Majesty. It seemed that His Majesty had already thought of this. Xinjia's armor, the token from the palace, and Lin Xiaola's clothes were on the tray. The commander's residence in the palace is still there. Nothing has changed, the guard said. Reporting to Your Majesty, Xinjia will have an audience with the Emperor after bathing and changing her clothes. Xinjia cupped her hands in greeting and took the tray. With the imperial edict and token, she could be considered to have been reinstated. After that, Xinjia didn't need anyone to lead her. She was familiar with the palace, so she carried the token back to her residence in the palace. Along the way, all the guards she met bowed respectfully to her. Although Xinjia had just returned, she was still their leader in their hearts. When he returned to his courtyard, it was clean. It seemed that someone had just cleaned it. Xinjia went to the courtyard to fetch water for a bath. She had never relied on others to do these things before. After taking a bath and changing her clothes, Xinjia carefully caressed the familiar armor before putting it on again. He walked out of the courtyard and called for a guard. Where's Librarian Lin? As soon as she asked the question, she knew that there was no need to ask any more. He went straight to Qingxin Palace Hall. Sure enough, Lin Xiaola was lying face down in the courtyard with the tray thrown aside. Only the candy that she snatched from Tong Lan was still tightly clenched in her hand. Xinjia didn't hold back and kicked him. The hairs on Lin Xiaola's body stood on end. She jumped up and struck with her claw. This move wasn't very effective against Ren Baqian, so it was even more useless against Xinjia. Put on your clothes and follow me to see Her Majesty, Xinjia said coldly. Only then did Lin Xiaola remember that she still had something to do. He changed into his clothes in the yard, yawned and said, Let's go. The eerie old woman sitting on the second floor of Qingxin Palace twitched her ears and cursed. This girl has forgotten who picked her up. Although Supervisor Lin's feelings for Lin Xiaola were like that of a kitten or puppy, but she didn't expect that the lass would fall asleep in the courtyard when she came back, and then she went to see His Majesty, completely forgetting about her. For a moment, he felt that he had raised an ingrate all these years. The two of them headed to the Azure Cloud Palace, which was the current location of the Empress. Originally, the Emperor's sleeping quarters were located in the center of the palace. After it collapsed, they moved to the west side, and when the west side collapsed, they moved to the east side. Over the past few years, the interior of the palace had been demolished and rebuilt, and Ren Baqian and the Empress could be considered to be living in less than half of the palace. Counting the number of palaces that the Han nation's emperors had lived in for more than a dozen generations, the total number of palaces that they had lived in was probably less than that of 2 emperors. Now, the entire palace was waiting for the new palace to be built so that they wouldn't have to go through any more trouble. As for the instigator of all this, the roaring emperor was still diligently digging holes in the ground while no one was looking. The cobweb-like passageways under the palace that Honeysuckle had walked through were his masterpieces. Now, that place had become a place for Honeysuckle to explore, and he was always able to find something that tasted good. When they arrived outside the Azure Cloud Palace, the two of them heard a series of children cheering. They looked in the direction of the sound and saw a 7- or 8-year-old child jumping up and down along the trees in the courtyard. In a short while, the child jumped in front of the two of them and looked at them curiously. Looking at the pair of phoenix eyes that were exactly the same as the Empress's, the two of them knew who this child was. Xinjia also squeezed out a smile and said, Princess. Who are you? Honeysuckle looked up at Xinjia curiously, sniffed, and his attention was quickly attracted by something else. She moved her feet and appeared in front of Lin Xiaola. She circled around her and reached for the bag of sweets on Lin Xiaola's waist. This bag was given to her by Ren Baqian, and it just so happened to contain the sweets that she had snatched from Tong Lan. Smack. Honeysuckle stared at the bag at Lin Xiaola's waist and felt a pain in his hand. Lin Xiaola's ears trembled and she bared her canine teeth. It's mine. Honeysuckle was stunned. After being in the palace for so long, this was the first time that someone actually hit her without giving her anything. For a moment she forgot to cry. This is the princess. Xange's face turned cold and she really wanted to give her a kick. I'm also a secretary, Lin Xiaola said disapprovingly. I've always been the one robbing others. When has anyone ever robbed me? Xange's expression changed.